A boy named Chrome lost his parents to a monster attack. From that day forward, he vowed to become an adventurer. In this world, humans were granted skills by God to fight against the monsters, and these skills were revealed before the age of 12. Among all adventurers, S-rank adventurers stood at the pinnacle with their power rivaling an entire army. As a child, Chrome dreamed of performing heroic feats like those told in fairy tales, so he prayed earnestly to God. He asked for the power to rid the world of evil, yet his hopes were betrayed. One day, he found out that his skill finally manifested, so he rushed to a priest to share it. But the priest gave him a troubled expression. Hence, his world shattered when the priest said his skill made becoming an adventurer unlikely. Years later, Chrome found himself inside a dungeon. There, a man named Arthur ordered him to walk properly, so Chrome hurriedly apologized. But Arthur kept reminding him he was lucky to be hired despite his useless skill. His revival ability let him resurrect once, which is a trait deemed nearly worthless for combat-focused adventurers. As a result, Chrome lived as a third-rate adventurer and took odd jobs others avoided. Still, he took pride in playing even a small role in protecting the country. Suddenly, Arthur told another guy Chrome's sister had magic but refused to join his party. In response, the other guy agreed that she really would. Hearing this, Chrome simply laughed in embarrassment. Soon after, a strange noise echoed, so Arthur hurriedly turned around. There, he saw a monster approaching. Drawing his sword, he unleashed his flame cloak ability, while his companion used Herculean strength. Together, they swiftly brought the creature down. After it, they remarked that imps were minor threats yet kept running around. Following that, Arthur ordered Chrome to retrieve the monster's magic stone. After Chrome picked up the magic stone, he reminded them they'd strayed from their route and urged them to return. But Arthur dismissed the warning with irritation. Suddenly, a sound from above caught their attention. Upon looking up, Chrome's eyes widened. There, he found multiple eyes staring back at them from the shadows. Upon seeing the bugbears, Arthur quickly realized that the imps led them right to them. Nevertheless, they tried fighting it, but there's no end to end. With that, Arthur confirmed they were tough, numerous, and insatiably hungry. But his expression shifted as an idea formed. Meanwhile, Chrome also faced the bugbears, but as he struggled to fend off the creatures with his sword, he quickly realized his strikes had little effect. Suddenly, a noise drew his attention to look up. There, he saw Arthur had climbed to safety atop a nearby cliff. Immediately, he called for help, but Arthur said his death was better than risking them. He also justified that Chrome's revival skill will help him once. With that, they abandoned Chrome, but Chrome knew escape was impossible even with revival. Soon, the monsters surrounding him grew more frenzied, lunging forward and gnawing at him with savage force. Pain tore through his body, yet he refused to let his life end in a place like this. Eventually, the monsters lost interest and left him to die. At that moment, his revival skill activated. Time blurred until he awoke, and found he was alive but unsure what to do next. Then suddenly, he noticed a skeletal hand lying before him. Soon after, he saw his skeletal reflection on his sword. Immediately, he checks his body and questions it. Furthermore, he panicked when he realized he could not even speak. Desperate for answers, he began checking his status screen. There, he saw his level was no longer 9, and his species was now listed as white. He also found out that a white is a mana-infused corpse dangerous for E-ranks but mindless. Upon reading this, rage flared within him because he clearly had a mind of his own. Suddenly, he recalled the priest saying his skill was unrecorded and unsuitable for adventuring. So now he wondered if his transformation came from his injuries or the dungeon's mana. Either way, his current state is practically a death sentence. With this in mind, he finally accepted that he actually did die. Looking at himself, he remembered his unsatisfying life, where he dreamed of protecting his country but was cursed with a defective skill. Despite risking his life every day, he had been mocked just as Arthur had done earlier. Suddenly, he remembered his sister asking why not quit if he lacked talent, and thought she might be right. His tears then welled as he thought only the skilled became high-tier adventurers. But then he shook away the thought. He recalled monsters could evolve with levels and skills, and thought he might regain humanity. If that happened, he might even reach the S rank he had once given up on. Even so, whites were weak monsters, so evolution from such a form was daunting. Yet he reminded himself that he was not an ordinary monster since he could think. That was his advantage, and his only hope that is worth trying. Later, while he played dead, he realized his skeletal form let him slip past monsters unnoticed. Determined to survive, he studied the dungeon, watched weaker prey, and noted exploitable advantages. After some time, he spotted a goblin nearby. He tried to sneak closer, but the goblin became alert. However, it only saw a lone skeleton hand lying on the ground. In a sudden movement, Chrome lunged forward from the shadows and struck the goblin from behind. With that, his decoy worked perfectly. As a result, he managed to level up from 1 to 3. Furthermore, defeating a monster stronger than himself filled him with confidence, and with his intelligence and skeletal body, he believed he could reach the Wight's maximum level of 5 to evolve. Having died once, he resolved to level up as if his life depended on it. Before long, Chrome encountered another monster. A quick status check identified it as a goblin slug. With steady determination, he sliced it cleanly in half. As a result, it earned him a single experience point, which he found frustratingly stingy. But it became clear his strategy of avoiding strong foes for weak ones had reached its limit. He then realized continuing this way might take decades to evolve, so he decided to hunt stronger foes. But before that, he set his sword down for a moment and sat beside it. Suddenly, he felt like he no longer needed rest or food, but if he stayed awake constantly, he feared he might forget what it was like to be human altogether. Closing his eyes, he admitted that not having to eat was convenient. Yet the lack of sunlight in the dungeon made it difficult to track the passage of time, so he hoped less than a week had passed and wondered if his sister Clamia worried since she was used to his absences. With that in mind, he remembered the time she had saved him and told him to quit adventuring if he lacked the talent. Hence, he figured she likely wasn't concerned by his absence. Realizing the thought weighed on him, he blamed the oppressive dungeon for such negativity. Regardless, he knew he couldn't stay put since he had to take risks to grow stronger. Not long after, a wolf appeared. Its status revealed it to be a red-eye species. Chrome immediately acted dead as it approached. The beast bared its teeth, but eventually decided to pass him by. Still, his nerves were on edge since, but he'll also level up if he defeats it. However, the level 7 red-eye was far stronger and faster than him who is level 3. The odds were against him, but he's a monster with human intelligence and advantages. Quietly, he began following the red-eye, and his earlier act of playing dead let him observe his targets undetected. Eventually, Chrome located the Red-Eye's territory and began formulating his next move. Not long after, the Red-Eye found a bag beside Chrome's motionless body. Drawn by curiosity, the beast approached to investigate. Following that, Chrome sprang to his feet, darted behind it, and drove his blade into its back. As a result, the Red-Eye roared in pain. As the blood splattered across, Chrome was glad he guessed the creature would approach a corpse's luggage to check food. Soon, their struggle causes them to fall off the cliff. When the Red-Eye crashed into the ground below, Chrome began to stab it again. Though his skeletal form lacked flesh, its light weight allowed him to move quickly. Against a stronger foe, he used every trick and kept stabbing. But suddenly, the Red-Eye clamped its jaws around his sword and also began to bite down on his arm. Soon, it tore the limb that is still gripping the weapon. Upon seeing it, Chrome realized late that his arm was gone, but he refused to lose, so he used his severed arm and drove it into the creature's body. As a result, the Red-Eye groaned in agony as it lost more blood. After it died, Chrome emerged victorious. His level also leapt from 3 to 5. At last, he finally did it, and fulfilled the conditions for his evolution. Knowing that, he marveled at his growing speed thanks to his monster body's resilience. Furthermore, he instinctively understands how to evolve, so he walks toward a nearby pond. Not long after, a cracking sound echoed through his bones. With this, his body was beginning to transform. The process also restored his missing arm. As his form shifted, he hoped to look more human, but instead, the reflection showed a ghoul, which is a corpse-eating demon with claws, fangs, and regenerative power. Though his appearance was still monstrous, he took satisfaction in looking more human than before. Moreover, his restored arm must have been a perk of evolution. Upon checking his status, he found all his stats had risen and gained the coveted regeneration skill he wished for. Still, the path of becoming a monster was never part of the plan. Even so, he learned that a ghoul could evolve again upon reaching level 20. With that goal in mind, a thrill ran through him. Besides, he had to keep evolving to regain his human form and become the strongest adventurer. Afterwards, Chrome's next opponent was a massive monster rat. The creature suddenly attempted to seize his sword, so he quickly pulled the weapon back, but his claws hindered him from using the sword properly. Suddenly, the rat slammed into his chest, sending him staggering backward and forcing him to be in pain. Deciding to change tactics, he hurled the sword toward the rat. As the beast reached for it, Chrome leapt in and drove his claws deep into its body. When the rat collapsed, Chrome stared at his claws and realized a weapon might only get in his way. Nevertheless, the battle granted him 7 experience points and raised his level from 5 to 6. But it is still far from the next evolution at level 20. Pushing that thought aside, he activated his regeneration skill. The wound in his abdomen closed rapidly. Hence, a ghoul's body is indeed convenient. However, this also brought a terrible hunger. Without hesitation, he carved off one of the rat's legs. The meat was filthy, but he couldn't resist, which made him realize he was becoming more monstrous. Still, he paused when he realized that this lifestyle felt more human than the emptiness he had experienced as a white. Clenching his hand, he told himself that he's closer to being human. With that resolve, he finished the meal without restraint. Days later, he crossed paths with a level 14 orc. Wasting no time, he struck it hard on the head. As a reward, he earned 33 experience points and raised him to level 14. Seeing this, Chrome noted that his pace was impressive. Thanks to his regeneration skill, he could afford to take risks, and as an undead, fatigue never slowed him down. Now he only needed 6 more levels before he could evolve again. Still, he thought his progress was unreal, because he's already stronger than his former level 9 self. Still, he hoped his next evolution would bring him closer to a human form. However, the thought made him recall his sister Clamia and wonder what she was doing. They had once been close, but in recent years, she had barely spoken to him. His flawed skill made adventuring hard, and low earnings made supporting her a constant struggle. Unlike him, Clamia had been blessed with a magic skill suited for an adventurer. On the day she achieved the rank of C-rank adventurer, he had approached her to speak, but she had only looked at him. Still, he smiled and told her she was amazing, while he remained stuck at D rank. In response, she told him it was foolish for a weakling like him to pursue adventuring. With that, she asked him why he didn't just stop if he didn't have the talent for it. Afterwards, her natural talent contrasted with his lack, and she gradually looked down on him. As her career advanced, they spoke less, and awkwardness eventually made him avoid going home. Now, after so much time, Chrome wondered if she cared about his fate or felt nothing. Regardless, he knew returning home in his current form would mean immediate extermination. Furthermore, he still couldn't speak properly and only produced guttural noises, which strained his voice. While lost in thought, Chrome caught the sound of movement within the dungeon. At first, he assumed it to be a goblin, but upon checking, he saw a group of people was nearby, and this surprised him. Furthermore, among them was Clamia. Though the dungeon is near the town, he hadn't expected such an encounter. Convinced they would kill him if discovered, he attempted to slip away unnoticed. Meanwhile, Clamia questioned the missing salve, while a man admitted they hadn't expected so much would be needed. Another woman then noted they couldn't check the quantity since their storage bags were opaque. However, Clamia saw this as a basic oversight and questioned the group's preparedness for monster bites. The woman then countered that most wounds could be treated with cleaning and potions, but Clamia criticized the man and questioned if someone so unprepared could be trusted in danger. Hearing this, he argued that they had agreed to assist her on short notice, but she held that the responsibility was his alone, with no excuse for unpreparedness when lives were at stake. But this angered the man more. Observing nearby, Chrome recognized that Clamia had not changed even inside the dungeon. Though he agreed with her points, he felt her delivery was unnecessarily harsh. In the midst of this, Chrome's claw accidentally scraped against the wall. Upon hearing it, the entire group immediately turned toward the sound. Clamia reacted at once by raising her staff and beginning to summon her ice magic. Upon hearing it, Chrome quickly recognized Clamia's ice magic. Soon, multiple ice arrows were released from her magic circle and hurled towards Chrome. As a result, Chrome was hit in the arm. The group then advanced cautiously and realized that the intruder was only a ghoul. With that, the woman concluded that while he might be durable, his strength was limited. Hearing this, Chrome understood then that the situation was about to turn against him. After all, it's the adventurers who found him, and it had to be Clamia of all people. Suddenly, the level 15 girl named Leaner reminded the others that ghouls possessed healing abilities. In addition, the level 14 guy named Derek suggested finishing Chrome off in a single strike. But Clamia, who's level 18, noted that rushing a ghoul without cornering it would cause unnecessary injuries. Hearing this, Chrome doubted his ability to survive even a one-on-one battle. Besides, Clamia is already level 18 and really gotten stronger. So now his only hope is finding a moment to escape from them. Unexpectedly, Derek began to move with the intention to smash him with his skill. Using his scorching slash, he wielded his sword towards Chrome. After dodging it, Chrome realized that it's a skill that cloaked his sword in flames. Soon after, Lena followed immediately. She quickly activates her light body skill to leap over Chrome and land behind him. Upon seeing this, Chrome notices her surprising speed. Without hesitation, she struck Chrome with her sword. With that, Chrome decided that he can't take a single hit from Derek, so he could only dodge Lena's attacks, though he'd get a chance if he failed. Besides, they were in different levels, so escaping seemed impossible. Furthermore, he didn't want to attack humans at all. Suddenly, Derek advanced again with another attack. Thinking quickly, Chrome kicked a nearby stone and it directly hit Derek's sword. Enraged, Derek couldn't believe that a ghoul kicked a stone at him. Unexpectedly, Chrome closed the distance and struck him in the chin. However, he made sure not to use his claws. Wasting no time, Chrome turned around and fled. While on it, he assumed they'd stop since chasing monsters deeper was forbidden. However, Derek was furious by what happened, so Lena decided to take up the pursuit. Realizing she might overtake him, Chrome decided to confront her directly. When she caught up, she was startled to see him standing his ground. Regardless, she attacked him and Chrome endured several strikes thanks to his regeneration. After that, he proceeds to slap her sword from her grip and sends it into the wall. Seeing how surprised she was, Chrome knew she hadn't expected an undead to act so deliberately. Unexpectedly, Clamia summons her ice arrow again. Hearing this, Chrome knew that he's screwed. Soon, multiple ice arrows hurled at him. Moreover, she aimed them all directly at his feet. As a result, he quickly fell into the ground. Seeing this, Lena remarked on Clamia's precision and called it the work of the Ice Princess. On the other hand, Derek grumbled about wanting the kill for himself to level up, but Clamia dismissed his complaint since he's too aggressive. She also noted that she could have ended it faster if he kept the ghoul occupied. On the ground, Chrome knew that he's going to get killed now, so he forced himself to stand up. However, he found that he couldn't get up. That's because his thighs were completely gouged out. Looking at the nearby ice shards, he couldn't help but acknowledge its destructive power. Even so, he began channeling his regeneration skill. While on it, he's confident he could run again in a minute. But that hope disappeared when Clamia advanced with her staff. Seeing her, he knew he did not have that long. Suddenly, she summoned her ice magic once more. This time, she formed an ice lance. At that moment, Chrome realized that he was about to be killed by his own little sister. But his wounded leg made dodging and leaping at Clamia to disrupt her impossible. As regeneration healed him, he sought a way to disrupt her spell and gain more time to heal. Suddenly, he remembered that had been practicing speaking. Summoning all his effort, he shouted the word Clamia. Upon hearing this, she quickly paused. On the other hand, her lance was still released, but it hit the ground near Chrome instead. Seeing this, Derek questioned how she could miss at such close range. Meanwhile, Chrome was relieved because a direct hit would have ended him. Nevertheless, his gamble to call her name had unsettled her exactly as he hoped. Meanwhile, Clamia was visibly shaken by what he said, but Chrome's regeneration was already finished and began to rise again. Seeing this, she immediately began casting another spell, but Chrome began scaring her. Startled by this, she loses her balance and collapses to the ground. Without hesitation, he fled into the depths of the dungeon. Meanwhile, Clamia could not believe that she had been tricked by a monster. With that, Derek demanded to know why she let the ghoul escape when it was within reach, but she remained silent. She knew undead were corpses infused with dungeon mana, yet her brother's image flashed at the voice. Still, she told herself that she must have misheard it. Meanwhile, Chrome finally reached a safe hiding place after that near-death encounter, but after being cornered by 3 higher-level adventurers, he was reminded of their danger. Still, his regeneration skill had saved him, but from now on, he plans to avoid adventurers while hunting monsters. With that being said, he remembered it had been long since he saw Clamia in a dungeon. That's when he had joined her first expeditions, but she had long surpassed him in strength. Knowing this, Chrome understood that he could not allow himself to be found by her again. Suddenly, he noticed that Clamia's group was heading in the opposite direction, so he began moving the other way. Yet he recalled their path led deeper and wondered if she planned to go further. However, normal people can't stay long inside due to physical and mental exhaustion. Also, the dense mana was toxic and harmed humans the longer they stayed, so humans venturing into dungeons needed strategies with wide safety margins. Hence, he knew it was dangerous for their level to go further. But the thought of helping Clamia lingered, though he knew she'd kill him if she found him. Despite the risk, he decided to follow them from a distance. Further ahead, Clamia's group came across a corpse. Derek grimaced at the sight, while Clamia stepped closer to examine it. Derek then noted the body was stripped of valuables, and Lena muttered it was disgraceful. However, Clamia was unfazed and urged them to continue moving. Hearing this, Derek quickly asked if she truly intended to continue. Just like him, Lena also voiced her concern that it was too dangerous, but Clamia simply replied that she had explored this far countless times before, so with their combined skills, she believed cooperation would prevent issues if they avoided rushing. Hearing that, Derek felt forced into a supporting role and frustrated since she had also made mistakes. Meanwhile, Chrome was also surprised since stronger monsters thrived deeper in the dungeon where mana concentrated. Hence, planning is important, so her choice puzzled him since she was supposed to be a rational type. With that, he wondered why she seemed to be in an unusual hurry. Before long, a massive club slammed into the ground ahead, nearly knocking Lena off balance. Soon after, a towering level 22 ogre appeared. Seeing this, Chrome's suspicion was confirmed, but this monster belonged only in the dungeon's depths. With that, he wondered what Clamia would do since any misstep could cost her dearly. With this in mind, he considered jumping out to create a distraction, but he reminded himself that he was a monster too, and his presence would only make them feel surrounded. So for now, all he could do was watch. Meanwhile, Derek questioned Clamia and reminded her this was why he suggested retreat. However, she believed her magic could damage the ogre, so she insisted that it should not be undefeatable as long as they cooperated. However, Derek was skeptical about fighting such a terrifying monster. But looking at it, he realized fleeing with low-level skills would be deadly, so they had to try. With this in mind, he hurriedly readied his scorching slash. But before he could act, the ogre struck him. Hence, he was stunned that its reach was vast. Meanwhile, Lena followed and activated her light body skill to move quickly. But the ogre tracked her motion with ease. So while she's still surprised, the ogre struck her with his club. Witnessing this, Derek shouted her name in alarm. However, Lena was actually only grazed, but was also sent flying due to its strength. At that moment, Clamia acted next and summoned ice arrows. Immediately, it struck the ogre's weapon in the side of its abdomen. However, the ogre seized one of the shards and shattered it effortlessly. Seeing the ogre's resilience, Clamia knew her ice arrows weren't enough. Meanwhile, Chrome observed the scene with rising concern. Their levels were low and had poor coordination, so he wondered why their party reached this depth. With that, he began to fear for Clamia's safety. Gripping her staff, Clamia readied a stronger ice lance to create an opening for their next move. But the spell took time, and she needed Derek and Lena to create a bigger opportunity. Meanwhile, Derek doubted their chances since they lacked speed, power, and magic. Knowing that, he realized that they are going to die at this rate. But suddenly, Clamia ordered them to attack to distract it since a prolonged fight would be fatal. After saying that, Clamia resolved not to die in a place like this. However, Derek couldn't believe her order and he's pissed because she's safe in the rearguard. But running would get him caught, so he had no choice but to follow Clamia. However, a sudden idea made him smile. Immediately, he called Lena and began whispering to her. However, his words somehow gave her a complicated expression. Meanwhile, Chrome watched them and tried to understand their strategy. Suddenly, the ogre struck directly at Derek and Lena, so Lena hurriedly dodged the attack. However, Clamia realized that luring the ogre closer was impossible with their fear, so she had no choice but to risk everything on her ice lance. At that moment, Derek signaled that the timing was right, so Lena quickly moved toward him when he called her. After that, she used her light body skill to leap away with Derek, leaving Clamia behind. Realizing they left her, Clamia shouted after them. But Lena only responded that they meant no disrespect. Meanwhile, Chrome could not believe they would abandon her at such a crucial moment. Alone, Clamia braced herself as the ogre advanced. When the ogre lifted his weapon, she cast her ice lance. Seeing this, the ogre was surprised at first, but soon after, her lance cuts into the ogre's arm. As a result, the ogre growls loud in pain. Hearing this, she couldn't believe that she succeeded. However, the ogre retaliated with a swing of its club, so Clamia was sent flying to the ground. When the ogre growled in fury, Chrome moved toward her without hesitation. Suddenly, Derek shouted that the danger was Clamia's fault for diving into the dungeon on short notice. He also questioned why she searched for her low-rank brother who's certainly dead. Hearing this, Chrome was momentarily shocked. Meanwhile, as the ogre's attack gets closer, Clamia thinks of her weak and reckless brother. Still, she is concerned for his whereabouts. As the club swung down toward her, Chrome intercepted the strike with a punch on the ogre's face. Immediately, the ogre's attack was halted. With this, he managed to glance at Clamia and silently apologize for hiding from her. But now he would be the one facing the ogre. Not long after, the ogre began attacking, so Chrome swiftly dodged its blows. He knew he was underleveled, but the creature's missing arm gave a slight edge, and above all, Clamia's life depended on his success. With this in mind, he launched his counterattack and was determined that losing was not an option. As a result, his strikes forced the ogre to stagger back. Seizing the moment, Chrome grabbed the remaining ice arrow and hurled it toward the ogre's head. The shard struck but only distracted the creature briefly. Soon, it swung its club in retaliation and forced Chrome to shield himself with his arm. As a result, the impact broke his arm. With that, he realized he was wrong to attack from its missing arm side. After all, it won't be that easy. Even with one arm, the ogre's speed, power, and reach were monstrous, so he needed a decisive opening. He then resumed moving and continued dodging its attack, Soon, he realized his one-armed attacks were predictable and could be dodged with focus. The creature was also showing signs of fatigue from repeatedly swinging its weapon, so Chrome resolved to wait patiently and relied on endurance despite his battered state. As time passed, the ogre grew impatient and snarled in frustration. Chrome noted its fangs were the next threat and anticipated them coming. Soon after, the creature lunged to bite him, so Chrome offered his left arm and let the ogre seize it. As the limb was torn away, he concentrated solely on preparing a fatal strike. Knowing he couldn't target the brain, skill core, or heart, he waited for the neck to come within reach. When the moment arrived, Chrome bit into the ogre's neck, and its pained roar filled the area. Afterwards, it collapsed and was lifeless. Suddenly, a notification confirmed Chrome reached level 18, which filled him with surprise at his unlikely win. Setting that aside, he began restoring his arm through regeneration. While on it, he silently valued the skill for letting him survive any injury short of death. After this, he proceeded to look toward Clamia to silently apologize and thank her. At last, he realized she wasn't condescending but worried. He pursued adventuring despite being defenseless. Later, as he carried her out, he began to consider how to prevent her from returning. While walking, he spotted a sword nearby. Upon checking it, he recognized it as the one he had discarded earlier. Moments later, the sound of a monster echoed through the dungeon, drawing the attention of nearby adventurers. They then spotted a girl under attack, so they quickly loosed arrows toward Chrome. Meanwhile, Clamia began to awaken during the commotion. Noticing this, the adventurers checked on her, but she asked instead where she was, so they explained that she had been unconscious and attacked by a ghoul. Confused, Clamia wondered about the ogre but sensed someone had rescued and carried her to safety. That sensation stirred a nostalgic memory, as if she were in the arms of her brother. But she quickly dismissed the thought as impossible. Suddenly, an adventurer pointed to a sword and asked if it belonged to her. Seeing it, Clamia realized it had been her brother's. Etched upon it were words promising his return and urging her to wait. Overcome with emotion, she embraced the weapon and wept. Meanwhile, Chrome vowed to see her again and only needed 2 levels to regain his human form. Later on his journey, Chrome encountered level 14 bugbears. He engaged them in battle and earned another 15 experience points. Afterwards, he began gnawing on one of the corpses, but he discovered that the meat was foul-tasting and carried a stench of wasabi. Furthermore, their tentacles had the texture of rubber, while their hides were as hard as metal, and their innards were akin to rotting entrails. Suddenly, he recalled being eaten by bugbears and wondered if these creatures also hunted humans. Despite his disgust, he couldn't stop eating such things as a ghoul. Once prey to bugbears, he now ate them while knowing monsters shunned stronger foes and humans couldn't linger in dungeons. Even so, his rapid growth to level 18 was still unbelievable. Still, he is now closer to regaining his humanity after progressing from white to ghoul. With only 2 more levels to evolve, he imagined he might even be able to enter a town. Still, he knew there was little point in worrying about it now. Furthermore, progress would be slow unless he fought stronger monsters, but he never wanted to face another ogre. While lost in thought, a creature quietly approached from behind. Unaware, Chrome continued thinking of hunting weaker prey. Unexpectedly, the figure struck without warning. He narrowly evaded the blow and was startled by the sheer force behind it. Checking its status, he discovered that his attacker was a level 21 gargoyle. Not long after, the gargoyle uses its sword and slams toward him. However, Chrome found it strange for a monster above level 20 to appear in this area. Without warning, the gargoyle gathered power in its mouth and released a blazing breath. The flames seared Chrome's arm, but before he could recover, he saw the creature follow up with a direct sword attack. Chrome immediately tried to dodge the gargoyle's sword, but its blade still grazed his cheek. The creature then followed up with a crushing elbow strike to his face, sending him hurtling into the wall. Dazed and in pain, he was astonished by the blow's force after barely avoiding the sword's edge. Furthermore, the gargoyle blinded him with flames and flew silently, making it impossible to track. Suddenly, he remembered winning against the ogre only because Clamia's spell severed its arm, so he began running away because he stood no chance here even with his recent level gains. However, the gargoyle immediately pursued him. There, he realized that it's also fast. As it was about to reach him, Chrome stopped abruptly and threw a punch at its face. However, he noticed something wrong. He found it was actually tough and did not even get a scratch. The gargoyle then countered with another sword strike, so Chrome was forced to retreat once more because of their difference in level and skills. But his escape came to an abrupt halt at the edge of a cliff. The gargoyle then began gathering power in its mouth again and released another blast of fire. Chrome then raised his arms to shield himself, but as the flames surged forward, the gargoyle advanced with its sword. However, it did not expect Chrome to vanish behind the blaze. In reality, Chrome had clung to the cliffside and was already anticipating the tactic from earlier. As the gargoyle passed, Chrome leapt on its back and was sure it couldn't corner him now. Knowing the terrain well, he sank his teeth into the creature. When they neared the ground, Chrome pushed off and drove the gargoyle's face into the ground. With that, his level rose from 18 to 20 thanks to the fall damage. After all, there was no way he could have won in a straightforward fight. Suddenly, he finally realized that he already reached level 20, which means he reached the level cap and can now evolve. With that, he silently thanks the defeated gargoyle for helping him. After that, he headed to a nearby pond and was eager to see his reflection after evolving. As he glowed, he prayed for a form closer to that of a human. Soon after, the transformation began. His face began to reshape, and his arms began to form some muscles. When the final transformation ended, Chrome had evolved into a rank C shapeshifter. Seeing his reflection, Chrome realized his body had grown and his clothes were torn. However, the mask on his face could not be removed. Aside from that, evolution should bring monsters to their ideal form, yet he became a terrifying monster instead of human. Checking his information, he learned a shapeshifter hunted by imitating the living, and none who saw its true form survived. Suddenly, he noticed that it could also imitate the form of the living. Intrigued, he examined his status. There, his stats now far surpassed a ghoul's, and as a C rank, he could challenge parties of mid-rank adventurers. Among his new abilities was a skill called Masquerade. Wondering if it could restore his human appearance, he activated it without hesitation. Suddenly, his mask lifted from his face, and light enveloped his body. After that, he looked into the water and saw his appearance. At last, he looked just like he used to. Although his voice remained slightly hoarse, it was functional. Thus, he felt relieved knowing he could pass as human if part of his face stayed hidden. However, he noticed his hands trembling from a sudden drain of power. Upon checking his status, it revealed that the skill consumed 1 mana point every 10 minutes. So with a maximum of only 26, he could maintain the transformation for no more than 4 hours. Knowing city life would be hard with this, he aimed to increase his mana and awaited his next evolution. With this decision, he chose to take things slowly and continue leveling up. But without warning, the dungeon walls began to crack. A powerful tremor then shook the entire cave and made him realize that an earthquake was happening. Suddenly, a massive boulder crashed down on him, but he quickly avoided it. When the shaking stopped, he wondered if he had just experienced a dungeon disaster. It was said giant monster corpses deep underground leaked evil mana and formed dungeons. If left unchecked, mana buildup caused eruptions of unnatural phenomena called dungeon disasters. With this in mind, Chrome suspected C-rank monsters' appearance might be a warning sign. Still, he knew it was too soon to conclude from only a few encounters. But his thoughts were interrupted when another creature appeared. Upon looking at it, he found that it's another gargoyle. Hence, he began to think his earlier suspicion might be right after all. Suddenly, the gargoyle charged with its sword and forced Chrome to evade. Without claws, he grabbed a rock and hurled it at the monster, but the attack only seemed to confuse it. Worse still, his human form left him unable to muster his full strength. Suddenly, the gargoyle unleashed a stream of fire, which he blocked with his arm. Soon after, it lunged forward with another sword strike, so Chrome countered with a punch to its face. Enraged, the gargoyle tried to ram him with its stone body, but he had already anticipated it. After seizing the creature, he slammed it into the ground with such force that its head tore free and rolled across the floor. After that, Chrome earned 90 experience points. Thanks to his regeneration, he had been able to charge through the flames and quickly heal himself. Even so, he could hardly believe he'd beaten the gargoyle and thought he might now defeat an ogre alone. Unlike most monsters, he was intelligent, mana-resistant, and tireless, so he's likely close to his next evolution. With this confidence, he felt no fear at the idea of facing more gargoyles. But not long after, an entire group of gargoyles appeared and sneered at him in unison. Seeing this, he immediately ran knowing that this many opponents were still beyond him. After a long sprint, he managed to lose them and find a place to hide. Even so, monster appearances were rising, so something certainly happened in the dungeon. Afterwards, Chrome found himself engaged in battle once again. Using his claw, he struck the gargoyle down in a single blow and quickly advanced to level 21. After that, he realized the shapeshifter's power and how easily it could defeat gargoyles. However, he soon noticed a scratch on his arm. As he used regeneration, he was reminded how monsters surpassed humans with natural weapons and endurance. Upon checking his status, He learned his next evolution would come at level 50 and likely sooner than expected. Despite this, he was unsettled by C-rank monsters appearing in a zone meant for D-rank creatures, so this led him to suspect that a dungeon disaster was imminent. But such disasters unleash high-level monsters can only be stopped by defeating the dungeon's boss. However, the thought concerned him as an unchecked dungeon disaster was unpredictable. While considering this, Chrome suddenly heard human footsteps approaching and quickly hid behind a rock. Nearby, Level 20 adventurer Frank noted the quake and gargoyle surge as signs of a coming dungeon disaster. Hearing this, Level 19 Gil found the timing awful and suggested reporting it to the guild. In contrast, Level 18 Shelly argued they should face the boss at once to prevent casualties. Hearing this, Chrome feared not retreating sooner was a mistake since these adventurers were evenly leveled and dangerous. Meanwhile, Gil continued expressing his hesitation to risk their lives. Frank then insisted delay would worsen things, and believed their early discovery gave them a chance to stop it. However, Gil argued that challenging the boss without information was reckless, as its level would rise and its form could change during a dungeon disaster. Still, Frank was unconcerned and was certain the boss's magic stone would fetch a fortune. Beyond profit, he feared a monster nest would ruin commerce, causing unemployment, famine, and suffering. Furthermore, defending people was an adventurer's duty and risk was part of the calling. Hearing this, Chrome was reminded of the tragedy that had befallen his own parents. Meanwhile, Gil questioned taking such a risk, but Frank reminded him a dungeon disaster had destroyed Shelly's hometown. Hearing that, Shelly was filled with sorrow. On the other hand, Chrome silently realized her loss outweighed his, since his town had been rebuilt. Meanwhile, Frank admitted the risk was great so he wouldn't force them since warning others was also vital. But before the group could decide, Gil suddenly noticed movement. A hand was visible near a boulder. Without hesitation, he drew his bow and fired an arrow, which nearly struck Chrome. Startled, Chrome realized his hiding spot had been discovered. Meanwhile, Gil's Eye of Artemis skill had warned him that something was wrong. Recognizing that it was too late to flee, Chrome prepared himself to use a skill. At the same time, Frank gave 3 seconds for whoever hid behind the rock to reveal themselves. As he drew his sword, he began counting down. When it ended, he tried to strike toward the boulder. In response, Chrome activated Masquerade. After that, he stepped out raising his hand, and he claimed to be an adventurer. Seeing his human form, Frank quickly apologized. However, Gil demanded to know why he had been sneaking around. Chrome then said they might be adventurers or bandits, and dungeon encounters often cause trouble. However, Gil found Chrome oddly guarded and unsettling, so he wondered if it was better to eliminate him now. Meanwhile, Frank also noticed Chrome's battered look and wary demeanor that is unordinary. On the other hand, Chrome realized that his attempt to trick them in human form had failed. Looking at them, he knew it made the situation grow more dangerous. Suddenly, Frank apologized for Gil's unfriendly attitude and asked Chrome to overlook it. Yet he wondered how Chrome stayed unscathed in the cave's middle layers. But his dirty clothes implied he had been in the cave for days and raised more doubts. Though they probed him, Gil's youthful distrust as an adventurer was taken to extremes. Meanwhile, Chrome saw the danger and planned to escape if they'd pressed too far. Worse, they could strike any time, so he considered attacking first to scare them and escape. With that, both he and Frank were left silently debating their next move. Unexpectedly, Shelly asked with concern if Chrome would be fine alone during the disaster. Surprised, Chrome quickly said yes and was puzzled by her lack of suspicion. Meanwhile, Gil immediately scolded her and warned that Chrome might be a bandit. However, Shelly smiled while saying his face showed he wasn't a bad person. Hearing that, Gil silently calls her an idiot for being so careless. Regardless, Shelly asked if Chrome was truly alone and what happened to his companion. Before he could reply, she offered to escort him out. Alarmed, Chrome quickly refused and claimed he was fine while fleeing. As he left, Frank stopped Gil from shooting. However, Shelly worried aloud about Chrome's safety. In response, Gil dismissed her and said no sane adventurer would help the suspicious. But Shelly believed Chrome wasn't evil and feared he'd die if left behind. However, Frank warned Chrome was suspicious and chasing him could cause a fight. Still, Shelly clung to her belief that Chrome was not a bad person. In contrast, Frank deemed chasing Chrome too risky and safer to let him go. Besides, Gil made Chrome way too scared of them. In the end, Shelly's kindness eased the tension and let Chrome escape without a deadly clash. Hence, he concluded suspicion and composure mattered, but Shelly's trust was also valuable. Moving on, he let Gil decide whether they should retreat or confront the dungeon boss. After thinking, Gil admitted he didn't share Frank or Shelly's ideals nor Shelly's optimism. Still, he reasoned it was easier to face the boss now and he'll fall back as rearguard if needed. Hearing this, Shelley brightened immediately. Meanwhile, Frank teases that he spoke well for someone usually so sour, but Gil quickly retorted that his choice was practical, since he could use them as a shield if necessary. However, Shelley reassured them they'd be fine since they are among the top guild parties. With that, she encouraged them to fight as usual and bring the enemy down together. Even so, her thoughts lingered on the dungeon disaster. The memory of those monstrous faces stirred her determination. Remembering this, she refused to let the tragedy happen again while she could prevent it. Meanwhile, Chrome rested after fleeing the encounter. Still, he wondered why they hadn't pursued him, as he must have seemed suspicious. With this in mind, he recalled Shelley asking if he would be all right alone, but her kindness deeply moved him after being long unused to such words. Besides, a week had already passed since he became undead, and even his own party had grown cold toward him. Suddenly, he recalled their plan to challenge the boss and felt uneasy despite their high rank. Still, worrying was pointless. Even if he stayed, their suspicion would have hindered him. Moreover, they're headed for the fight confidently, and he would only get in the way. Besides, he couldn't use his true strength in human form or reveal his monstrous identity. Yet he couldn't ignore Frank's words that adventurers rise to defend the people. Remembering this, Chrome fell silent. Elsewhere, Gil found the dungeon boss in a dead-end passage where the air was suffocating. With that, Frank warned them to stay sharp because they are facing something far stronger than before. Indeed, standing before them was the level 30 Gargoyle King. Slowly, the eye embedded in its stomach opened, and the creature unleashed a deafening roar. Meanwhile, Shelley was shocked by the gargoyle's high level, but retreat was impossible. Suddenly, Frank shouted that he would handle the front while instructing her to circle to the side. Drawing his sword, he knew they had to go all out against the higher level foe. With this in mind, he released his sword wave, but the gargoyle blocked it effortlessly with its sword. Seeing his attack fail, Frank shifted focus and struck at its exposed left arm. However, he found it far tougher than expected. With that, the blow left the arm completely unscathed. Meanwhile, Shelley charged forward and dodged an immediate attack. She noted it wasn't fast, and her sword princess skill, which awakened her latent talent with the blade skill, let her hold her own. Spotting an opening, she swung her sword at the gargoyle, but it felt as though no damage had been dealt. Suddenly, an arrow shot from above and failed to penetrate the gargoyle's body. Observing the scene, Gil recognized the futility of using his arrows. Meanwhile, Frank realized the monster was slow but incredibly durable. Furthermore, it's far too tall, so piercing its stone hide seemed impossible, and only its eyes were vulnerable, but dodging its sword seemed unattainable. Suddenly, the gargoyle swung its sword again, so Frank hurriedly blocked the strike. As he struggled, he tried to find another way to gain an advantage, but the gargoyle looked at him intently, and the surroundings began to glow. To his astonishment, he realized it possessed a magical ability. Moments later, the creature unleashed its flare vortex. As a result, Frank staggered backward, and his arms were seared from the attack. Regardless, he quickly checked on Shelley, who was unharmed but visibly defeated. But if he faltered as leader, morale would collapse, so he had to keep fighting. With renewed determination, he advanced with his sword beam. Intent on striking immediately, he collided with the gargoyle's flare vortex. Seeing this, Shelley shouted his name in worry. However, the gargoyle appeared momentarily startled. Seizing the opportunity, Frank executed a powerful cross slash directly at its head. After seeing cracks spread across its skull, he urgently signaled to Gil. Immediately, Gil fired an arrow after Frank overdid it. As a result, he hit the gargoyle's eye on its abdomen. After such an effective attack, Frank sensed a chance for retaliation. However, he noticed something was wrong. The gargoyle swiftly struck his sword, knocking it from his hands and throwing him off balance. Seeing Frank fall unconscious, Gil yelled to Shelley that they needed to retreat. However, the gargoyle loomed over Frank's prone body, so Shelley instinctively called Frank and stepped in front of it to shield him. Seeing this, Gil called her an idiot. After some time, Shelley sank to her knees in exhaustion while Gil lay beside her. She then struggled with wanting to carry Frank while fighting, but it was impossible. She also felt guilty for endangering Gil, so she apologized, but he asked her not to make it sound like he had no choice in his. With that, he reassured her it was his choice to stay and fight, and no one else could decide for him. Hearing this, Shelley was taken aback by his resolve. Suddenly, the gargoyle raised its sword once more, so Shelley closed her eyes and braced for impact. At that moment, someone grabbed Frank's sword. Soon, Shelley heard the clash of steel rang out. When she opened her eyes, she was surprised to be alive. Furthermore, she saw Chrome holding the gargoyle's blade at bay as he declared he could no longer hide. Thus, he announced that he would face the gargoyle himself. Hearing his voice, Shelley realized that he was the man before. Meanwhile, Gil questioned his presence. but Chrome himself could not truly explain why he had come. At first, he felt he'd only hinder them and risk exposing his true form, but soon he began questioning his own excuses. Instead of hesitating, he reminded himself that his focus should be on what needed to be done, since even small efforts to stop monsters mattered, which was why he became an adventurer despite ridicule. More importantly, with others risking their lives, hiding his true form felt insignificant. Besides, his level exceeded theirs, and for that reason he was certain he could still be of use. Now in the present, Chrome clashed swords with the gargoyle. He then noticed that it had already taken some damage, but the more he observed, the clearer it was that their level gap made victory nearly impossible. He was only level 21, and the gap was evident. Suddenly, the gargoyle pressed its weapon against his and forced him backward. After being pushed away, Chrome realized victory would not come easily. Still, he wanted the others to escape while they could, but that chance was gone. After all, Frank lay unconscious, while Shelley and Gil were both wounded. Meanwhile, the gargoyle had only minor injuries like a small head wound and a mark on its stomach eye. Hence, he concluded the only way to bring it down was to target the eyes. Before he could act on this thought, the gargoyle attacked once more. With that, its blade successfully sliced across him. Seeing the wound was deep, Shelley's concern grew. Meanwhile, Gil thought Chrome was more capable than expected but likely at his limit. Unexpectedly, Chrome's eyes began to glow, which surprised the gargoyle. At that moment, he struck with sudden force and declared that he is tougher than he looks. Thus, he successfully drove his weapon into the eye on its stomach, causing the creature to roar in agony. Immediately, Chrome quickly regenerated and thought that as undead he could not fall so easily. After that, he lifted his weapon and prepared for the true battle to begin. With that, the gargoyle responded by unleashing its skill, Flare Vortex. Witnessing this, Chrome was surprised that it ignited itself in flames. However, attacking it in this state was impossible, so he immediately created distance. Unfortunately, the monster pressed forward until his back met the wall. Its blade also rose again, and this time evasion was no longer possible for him. Watching this, Shelley was also certain that he would really die. At the last moment, Chrome extended his monstrous hand and seized the weapon. The gargoyle's expression was then twisted in frustration, but Chrome ridiculed it for thinking it already won. Following that, he drove his sword deep into the stomach eye once more. As a result, the monster's screams echoed. Meanwhile, Shelley was confused since it seemed the monster caught Chrome, yet it cried out in pain, but she couldn't see anything beyond the blazing fire. Unexpectedly, the gargoyle's weapon soon ignited as well, forcing Chrome to release his grip. Immediately, he dodged as the flaming blade swung toward him. With that, he realized that the creature still lived and its resilience was far greater than expected. Suddenly, it began attacking him again. Hence, he can't strike back, and though regeneration let him endure, his mana was fading. With his energy nearly gone, he could no longer rely on regeneration or masquerade. Yet his enemy was reaching its limits too, so he must seize an opening first. But the gargoyle's reach kept Chrome from closing in, and with his body exposed, surprise was lost. For the moment, his priority was to escape the wall behind him. However, his attempt was blocked by the monster's blade. Thus, it was clear that the creature had no intention of letting him go. Meanwhile, Shelley was filled with fear for Chrome's life and struggled to rise. Equally determined, Gil forced himself to act despite his injuries. Managing to seize his bow, he refused to be just saved and quickly released his arrow. As a result, the arrow struck the ceiling of the cave. At first, Chrome thought Gil had missed, but then cracks spread through the stone above. Soon after, a large rock dislodged and crashed against the gargoyle's head, which made more cracks on its hardened forehead. Recognizing the opening, Chrome raised his sword. He then drove it once more into the ice set in the creature's stomach. The gargoyle shrieked in agony, but with desperate strength, it tore the blade free. Though the attack had inflicted damage, Chrome thought the monster remained incredibly resilient. With that, he saw his chance while it writhed in pain, but his sword lay at its feet now. Knowing that, he decided to use his claws instead. With a burst of speed, he launched himself above the monster. After shouting that this is the end, he struck the stomach eye directly. Soon, it burst with blood and light. At last, the battle was over. Chrome had slain a level 30 dungeon boss, and in doing so, his own level rose to 25. Suddenly, he saw mana disperse and knew with the boss gone, the disaster was over and spawns would normalize. Moving on, he briefly worried the others might have seen his undead form during the fight. However, Gil only noted Chrome had slain a foe beyond them, yet he'd never heard of him. Meanwhile, Chrome checked his status and saw his growth had turned the disaster into an opportunity. Seeing his status, he felt his next evolution would make him closer to human. However, Shelley stepped forward and thanked him for saving them while introducing herself. Startled, he quickly hid his status window from her. Still, she insisted on knowing his name. But Chrome realized his mana was nearly depleted and only 2 points remained. With Masquerade draining a point every 10 minutes, he knew his time was nearly up. While Shelley looked at him in confusion, he decided to leave before his true form was exposed. When Shelley pressed him again for his name, he chose to run rather than waste precious moments on something so trivial. Seeing this, Shelley stood frozen in surprise as he vanished from sight. Meanwhile, Gil wondered why Chrome had left so abruptly, especially since he had not even taken the boss's magic stone. After all, the crystal proved the boss's defeat and the disaster's end, so it is highly valuable. However, Shelley thought Chrome's departure without claiming a reward showed humility. But Gil doubted him, suspecting his quick recovery and solitude came from a unique skill. At that moment, Frank called him too distrustful. Hearing this, causing Gil to startle at his sudden recovery. Still, Frank reminded him Chrome saved them and urged trust, despite his odd circumstances. Hearing this, Gil reluctantly agreed. After that, they began piercing the gargoyle's stomach eye to extract the magic stone. While watching, Frank noted harvesting would take long, while Shelley worried claiming the stone was unfair since Chrome defeated it. But Frank reassured her, saying they needed the stone to prove the disaster's end and could repay Chrome later. Hearing that they might see him again, Shelley grew hopeful that fate would allow them to meet him once more. Meanwhile, Chrome was exhausted from nearly losing his masquerade in front of the others. His regeneration had been pushed to its limits, and yet he still found himself fleeing. Even so, he is now level 25 with 36 mana, and he could stay human for 6 hours. And with half a day's rest for recovery, hiding at home could make living among humans possible. With this in mind, he remembered Clamia, who was searching for him. Hence, he decided to return to human society and see it as training for his skill. In Raber, news spread in the Adventurers Guild that the Western Dungeon disaster and boss were already defeated. Frank then confirmed that it was his first level 30 foe, and the region could have become a monster nest. However, Guild Master Gars found the claim difficult to believe, so Frank clarified that it was not their party who delivered the final blow, which surprised Gars even further. Shelley then eagerly said a gallant knight had appeared and swiftly felled the boss. But Gars' skepticism grew when he asked if a single man truly defeated a level 30 monster. But knowing Shelley's exaggerations, he dismissed her words as another fanciful delusion. Flustered, Shelley insisted it was true and described their savior as a white-haired man with a refined face and sharp eyes. But Gil felt Chrome's pale skin, lifeless eyes, and gloomy aura didn't match that image. To him, Shelley was embellishing again, though she argued Gil was unfairly portraying Chrome negatively. Frank then clarified that while they helped, the true credit belonged to Chrome. Still, Gars remained unconvinced, so Frank presented the gargoyle's magic stone so they can confirm the truth. Hence, they were shocked by it and realized the white-haired man truly existed, but some thought he should be famous, yet he hadn't claimed the stone. Moreover, they speculated he was a selfless hero, or just a reckless battle maniac. Shelley then suggested he might be a wandering prince in training, but Frank quickly cut her off. Inwardly, he wondered if mentioning Chrome was a mistake, as he clearly wanted his identity hidden. Meanwhile, Clamia was surprised to hear the feat of this amazing unknown adventurer. After all, that cave was where her brother vanished and left only his sword and a message asking her to wait. With the blade still in her possession, she prayed he had not been caught in the recent disaster. Suddenly, she recalled that without its boss, the dungeon would weaken and take years to recover. Gripping her staff, she thought if it's finally safe to search for Chrome again. Afterwards, Frank felt the reward was worth risking their lives, but Gil found it barely enough, covering debts, gear, and small luxuries despite the life-threatening risk. Suddenly, Shelley asked if taking Chrome's reward was right, but Frank said they'd handle it if he ever returned. With that settled, the three of them agreed to divide the reward among themselves. However, Frank gave Shelley a little extra from his cut. Surprised, she immediately protested that she could not accept so much, but Frank insisted she take it, as she was finally going home after so long. Still, he reminded her to be cautious, as law and order there was poorly maintained. With that, Shelley bowed to thank him. In addition, she promised to repay his kindness tenfold, and Frank agreed. Before leaving, she waved farewell to the group, and Frank returned the gesture. After she left, Gil muttered that Shelley would waste her share on the church, which frustrated him with her foolishness and Frank's indulgence. However, Frank began talking about how the Earth's mana grew stronger each year. Moreover, scholars warned the kingdom could be devoured by dungeons within a century, making their battles and charity seem futile. but Frank said humans act even when it seems pointless, which was why Gil fought the dungeon boss. However, Gil thought it was already too late for the ruined city of Oddfield. In his view, Shelley should simply forget the place and move on. Elsewhere, Chrome continued his own path. After defeating an enemy, he gained 36 experience points. Yet no matter how many monsters he hunted, his level would not rise. Looking at his status, it seemed he had reached this dungeon's limit. With the boss defeated and monsters scarce, adventurers would soon claim the area, so he needed a new dungeon to advance. Still, he wished for a higher level to use Masquerade longer, but had to head to the city as he was. Though he longed to see Clamia, the crowded city unsettled him. And even in human form, he couldn't fully hide his fangs or the marks of his undead body. In darkness, his flaws were hidden, but it would be dangerous in the city, so he wished for a place to blend in. Suddenly, he recalled Arthur's fury at the idea of delivering cargo to Oddfield. Curious, Chrome had asked if Oddfield was truly so terrible, and Arthur had confirmed it. He then explained that the dungeon disaster left the city overrun with corpses and monsters. Remembering this, Chrome thought no one would notice a suspicious stranger there. By wearing a hood in human form, he could stay hidden, regain mana at the inn, and earn coins from monster stones. With that plan in mind, Chrome finally stepped out of the dungeon. With determination, he resolved to make his way toward the ruined city of Oddfield. Later at Oddfield, Chrome arrived and observed the town abandoned by the country. Looking around, he saw that the town matched the rumors, but the people appeared normal. Nevertheless, he felt wonder at being among humans, even if it was just a test for his skill and finding a dungeon. Still, he disliked their stares, so he needed better clothes, while finding an inn to rest in monster form. But to do that, he first required some money. Later at the guild, he presented magic stones collected from monsters above level 20. However, the clerk doubted that a frail and unarmed man could have gathered them, but he didn't know the stones were from Chrome's gargoyles, which would fund his stay. With that being said, the clerk handed him 500 gall. Surprised, Chrome asked if there was a mistake, since he could earn 10 times more in the capital. However, the clerk sarcastically replied that maybe he could, but unfortunately, Oddfield was not the capital but a town of social outcasts, so he speculated that Chrome might have stolen the stones, but Chrome insisted he had not. Still, the clerk explained the guild didn't ask for names or backgrounds, nor blame Chrome for entering in blood-stained clothes. With that, he told Chrome he could take it elsewhere, but warned him to be careful leaving the city safely. As Chrome walked away, he realized he'd be broke in a few days with this. Moreover, the clerk noticed he was unfamiliar with the town, so negotiation was likely futile. Unexpectedly, someone called out saying he had never seen Chrome's face before. In response, Chrome quickly asked what he wanted. The man named Jeff said Chrome had nothing to fear and offered to teach him the town's rules. Hearing about rules, Chrome thought Jeff might be trustworthy. Jeff then confirmed this, but immediately pushed him toward a wall. Alarmed, Chrome asked what he was doing. In response, Jeff demanded Chrome's money in exchange for protection. Realizing it was extortion, Chrome grabbed his hand and insisted he could handle himself, but Jeff claimed that a brat like Chrome could do nothing. To his surprise, Chrome managed to throw him aside. Realizing this, Jeff remarks on his incredible strength. Meanwhile, onlookers laughed that a brat knocked him off, while others thought that he had stumbled. On the other hand, Chrome estimated that Jeff was around level 20. Refusing to be humiliated, Jeff drew his sword to fight him. Seeing this, Chrome was surprised that he's doing it in broad daylight. Immediately, the crowd attempted to stop him, but Jeff refused to back down. Seizing the opportunity, Chrome approached and kicked the sword away. Hence, Jeff became even more enraged at seeing his weapon on the ground, but Chrome used the distraction to run. Seeing this, Jeff shouted after him and promised to kill him next time. Later, after running, Chrome considered fighting but decided it would draw attention since he had just arrived and been extorted. Later in his room at the inn, Chrome felt more exhausted than he had in the dungeon. He was now broken after buying a blade, a robe, and a room. But shared rooms were not an option, as he needed privacy to undo his skill and recover mana. Still, it had been long since he visited a human settlement, so he needed to stay to gather dungeon info and leave unnoticed. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, the priest asked Shelley if giving so much was wise since she had little to spare. In response, she assured him she was a capable newcomer despite her appearance. Still, the priest said the money would help but urged her to focus on making a living and forget them. But she refused to forget the church that raised her after the dungeon disaster. Aside from that, she also had many younger brothers and sisters here. Suddenly, a child asked if she was a famous adventurer from the capital, and she confirmed it. Hearing this, the child then asked if she could one day close the hole of disaster. Though taken aback, she promised that she would manage it someday. Later, as she left, she told them she would return and asked them to stay safe. In response, the priest reminded her to be careful since being an adventurer was dangerous. Meanwhile, Chrome struggled to gather info from unfriendly townspeople and wondered if he should sell magic stones in the capital. However, guards would likely stop him, and only in Oddfield could he move freely during the day. He also risked encountering someone like Arthur, who believed he was dead. Considering all this, Chrome concluded that Oddfield was the safer option. But as he walked, Shelley unexpectedly spotted him. Seeing her, he was equally surprised. However, she immediately recognized him as the one who had saved their lives. Hearing this, he was astonished at the unlikely coincidence. Immediately, she expressed shock at seeing him again, and Chrome was equally stunned. She then remarked that reuniting with her savior in her hometown felt almost like fate. Meanwhile, Chrome recalled she was Shelley, a dependable level 18 adventurer. He knew this after seeing her information in the dungeon. However, he wondered why she was in this city and also feared revealing too much if she checked his status. Suddenly, she emphasized that she wanted to thank him. However, Chrome ran off shouting that she had the wrong person. Startled, she called out for him to wait, but she recalled Frank saying Chrome might be a suspicious criminal from another town. With that, she thought there must be a reason for someone so strong to come to Oddfield. As she chased him, she shouted that she would not pry into his past, and that she only wanted to express her gratitude. However, Chrome wondered why she was following him and if she knew he was a monster. After a while, Shelley lost sight of him and guessed he might be a high-level adventurer due to his speed. Looking around, she tried to figure out where he had gone. Meanwhile, Chrome reached a dead end. Seeing the wall ahead, he decided to use his claws to climb since no one was nearby. Thus, he extended his claws to scale the wall and lose Shelley. As he climbed, his hands nearly reached the top. Unfortunately, his sword slipped from his body. Knowing it was worth 240 gall, he immediately chased down to retrieve it. However, he only hit his back and realized diving for it was unnecessary. Unexpectedly, Shelley appeared and awkwardly asked what he was doing. Seeing her, he realized he could no longer escape. After that, Shelley apologized for chasing him, but he acknowledged that it was his fault. Still, he asked if she truly would not pry into his affairs. She then promised she wouldn't since he was her savior, and she knew he had his own circumstances. Hearing this, Chrome felt grateful to find someone he could safely talk to. Suddenly, Shelley reminded him that he still had not told her his name. He then replied that his name was Chrome. Hearing this, she called him by name, which made him wonder if it's safe to use his real name. Setting that aside, Chrome asked her why she was in Oddfield, which made her fall silent. Noticing this, he quickly said she didn't need to answer, but she said it was fine. She explained that she usually worked near the royal capital, but returned to her hometown occasionally to check on it. Watching the people, she noted the city had changed since half a year ago and seemed increasingly dangerous. Chrome then recalled Frank saying Shelley's hometown had fallen to ruin from the dungeon disaster. Remembering this, he realized they were talking about Oddfield. Curious, he asked her to tell him more about the town since it was his first time there. She then shared that years ago, the town had been beautiful, even not very prosperous. Then, a dungeon nearby called the Hole of Disaster began causing chaos during her childhood. Monsters swarmed the city and the wealthy withdrew, which cut off contact with other towns. Soon, Oddfield became a refuge for outlaws and formed the ruined city it is today. Though outlaws protect the town from monsters, they treat former residents as slaves. So now her dream was to become a first-class adventurer and close the Hole of Disaster to free Oddfield. Listening to this, Chrome was astonished. Meanwhile, at the church, a boy exclaimed he wanted to be an adventurer under Shelley's guidance. He even had a fire skill and believed he could be of help. He also hoped to earn enough to support the church, and the priest said Shelley would be glad to hear it. Unexpectedly, the priest heard footsteps, which is unusual since few visited the church. Meanwhile, the boy approached the door thinking Shelley had forgotten something. When the door opened, two men entered instead. Upon seeing them, the boy immediately asked who they were. One of them was Jeff, who expressed surprise that the priest was still in town. Seeing the crest on his robe, the priest quickly recognized them as the evil dragons who now ruled Oddfield. Jeff then said their expansion was going well, but they needed more slaves, so their boss ordered them to sweep the town and capture anyone, even children. After saying this, he asked the priest if he would refuse them. Upon hearing this, the boy felt this had never happened before, yet his hands would not stop shaking. Suddenly, he remembered his skill and vowed to become like Shelley to protect everyone. At that moment, the man named Rado said brats were annoying but would obey the priest. Immediately, the priest knelt to beg them to spare the children, and offered himself as their slave instead. But Jeff dismisses him as a weak and useless old man. Undeterred, the boy stepped forward and declared that he would not let them act as they pleased. Seeing this, the priest reminded the boy named Tom that it was futile, but Tom cast his fireball at them anyway. Witnessing this, Jeff was amused that the boy had fire magic, but Rado simply waved his hand and dismissed the attack as worthless. Seeing this, Tom was shocked that his attack was so easily deflected. Rado then began summoning a magic circle to demonstrate how to properly use a skill. He cast Thunderbolt, and when it struck the wall crumbled. With that, Jeff commented that Rado's skill was impressive as always. Meanwhile, Tom fell to his knees after realizing how powerful his opponent was. Suddenly, Rado approached him and planned to make an example of him. As he raised his hand, he noted that this would also teach the priest a lesson. Hearing that, the priest recognized that Tom was in danger, but he noticed a rod nearby. Remembering his own experience fighting monsters long ago, he attempted to use the rod against Rado. However, a sword stops him. Following that, Jeff asked what he was planning, but the priest suddenly ordered Tom to run. Hearing this, Tom nodded and hurriedly fled. Seeing this, Jeff was visibly angered, but Rado told him to let it go. He noted that there were plenty of other children. More importantly, they needed the priest to know who was in charge, so he began beating him. Hearing the commotion, the other children emerged. Upon seeing them, the priest ordered them to stay back, which startled them, but Jeff stopped them with a threat to behead the priest if they ran. With the priest pressed to the ground, Rado said he would gradually increase his lightning magic to test how much the priest valued the children. Meanwhile in town, Chrome asked Shelly to guide him since all the streets looked alike. Hearing this, she assured him of her confidence in her city knowledge, and he timidly agreed. But suddenly she paused, and remembered how they had claimed the rewards instead of Chrome. Remembering that, she apologized for selling the bossie's magic stone and assured him the priest, Frank, and Gil would return it. However, he replied that he did not really care about it, but he realized his pouch was already empty, so he decided to ask her for 200 gall to pay for an inn, and she quickly agreed. After that, he started asking her about the nearby dungeon, but they were interrupted by someone calling for Shelly. When Shelly turned, she saw Tom running toward them and crying. She immediately warned him it wasn't safe outside and he shouldn't go alone. In response, Tom explained that some scary people had come to the church to kill the priest. Hearing this, Shelly's eyes darkened. Following that, she apologized to Chrome because she needed to leave immediately. But Chrome realized how serious it was, so he volunteered to accompany her. Besides, Shelly was his only trusted source of information in the city. At the same time, he could not stop thinking about the priest who had cared for them, so the situation feels personal as well. Meanwhile at the church, the priest was being tortured with thunder. Jeff then called him a stubborn old man and stomped on his head. After that, he urged him to tell the children to obey if he wanted to live. But even if the priest died, Jeff still planned to take the children, so his stubbornness was meaningless, and he even spat on him. Still, the priest replied that even if it changed nothing, he wanted the children to know he loved them. He also wanted them to remember he never backs down and believed it would guide them for life. Hearing that, Jeff called him a bastard. Meanwhile, Rado realized the priest can't take any more and called the children to watch. As he summoned his thunder, he urged them to see what happens when anyone defies the evil dragon. Suddenly, he heard a sound and stopped. Looking at the broken wall, he spotted Chrome, who asked what they were doing. In response, Rado said they'd made too much noise and didn't expect anyone to interfere. Meanwhile, Jeff noticed Chrome and immediately recognized him. On the other hand, Shelly saw their red dragon marks and confirmed they were the town's evil rulers. Hearing that they had been recognized, Rado asked why anyone would oppose them and said such people must be ready to die. Meanwhile, the priest finally recognized that Shelly was present. At the same time, Jeff burst into laughter and pointed out that Chrome was the coward who once fled in disgrace. Hearing this, Chrome realized that Jeff was the very extorter from the guild. Suddenly, Jeff began to advance with convinced that no one would intervene him now. Hearing this, the priest attempted to signal them to retreat, since the evil dragons would relentlessly pursue anyone who stood against them. But Jeff's attention shifted to Chrome's rusty sword, and he mocked it. He also assumed that Chrome had never experienced a true life or death battle. Unbeknown to him, Chrome had already faced such trials many times, like surviving encounters with both an ogre and the Gargoyle King. Knowing that, he told Jeff he'd never be threatened by someone so weak. While Jeff was still confused, he proceeded to attack him with his sword. Jeff was then taken aback by Chrome's speed and power. Looking at Chrome, he wondered if he might be higher level than him, but he stubbornly refused to accept it and tried to strike with full force. Yet Chrome's blade was faster and hit his chest. Thrown off balance, he stumbled back in disbelief after nearly being impaled despite retreating. Suddenly, Chrome's sword was already aimed directly at him. Chrome then said he only trembled from anger that someone could be worse than monsters. Hearing this, Jeff's hand trembled uncontrollably, but he could not accept shaking in fear of someone like Chrome. Abruptly, Rado interrupted by summoning his magic. Turning his attention to him, Chrome saw a crackling surge of power formed into Thunderbolt. With that, he was forced to leap backward as the spell struck. In the next instant, Rado closed the distance and engaged Chrome in combat with his sword. Rado then said that if Chrome could handle both Jeff and his attacks, he wasn't ordinary, but he's not smart enough after defying them for a mere church. Hearing this, Chrome thought how he can't undo his skill in a town like this, but Rado's skill became evident since his strength surpassed Chrome's human form. Despite this, Chrome stood his ground and met each strike without faltering. Meanwhile, Jeff watched in disbelief as Chrome managed to hold his own against Rado. Still, he believed Chrome to be a fool for leaving his back unguarded. Seizing the chance, Jeff lunged forward to strike. However, his sword was intercepted. It was Shelly who appeared and blocked the attack. After that, she exclaimed that she would be his opponent. Hearing this, Jeff grew furious at being belittled and shouted she'd regret it. Their swords clashed soon after, and Shelly nearly lost her balance. As she dodged his strike, she realized he was both fast and strong, so his level was clearly higher than hers. Jeff also saw she was outmatched, as her movements showed it was her first real fight against a human. Confident in his higher level and experience, Jeff believed he couldn't lose. Seeing her retreat, he mocked her fear and called her a naive adventurer in her first real fight. Grinning, he added that he liked playing with women and told her not to die too soon, but this left Shelly frustrated. Meanwhile, Rado continued blocking Chrome's relentless strikes until Chrome chose to back away. He then remarked that Chrome had guts but couldn't harm him with that scrap metal sword. Hearing this, Chrome was obviously affected. Suddenly, Rado asked why he chose to fight him since it was only natural for the strong to dominate the weak. So even if Chrome managed to drive them off, nothing would truly change. He also added that unlike Jeff, he disliked wasting energy. Moreover, serious clashes between high-level adventurers could cause irreparable damage, so he gave Chrome one last chance to withdraw from this petty act of justice. But Chrome replied by asking if he was telling him to stop since it wouldn't matter anyway. Recalling his struggles, he declared he'd never yield to arrogant men like them. After all, that same determination kept him from giving up on being an adventurer. With that, he shouted that he would not run from threats now after coming this far. Rado then scoffed and called him a fool. As a magic circle formed, he said he hadn't planned to go all out but couldn't let Chrome mock them. With a surge of energy, his weapon transformed into a blade crackling with lightning. Chrome's eyes then widened in shock because Rado had imbued his sword with lightning magic. Following that, Rado promised to reduce him to charcoal within seconds. Without hesitation, Rado launched an attack meant to kill Chrome. Seeing the incoming strike, Chrome quickly retreated. After all, he knew his sword would snap, and one hit could be fatal in his current form. Though he could dodge, he couldn't keep up if Rado forced him against the wall. Meanwhile, Shelly's attention drifted toward him. Noticing this, Jeff pressed forward and mocked her for worrying about someone else. She then hurriedly raised her sword to block his attack. Jeff sneered after realizing she was tougher than he had expected. Despite his higher level and experience, he still couldn't land a decisive strike against her defense. As he stepped back, he began to wonder why he was struggling with someone like her. Shelly then pointed out that his swings lacked resolve and determination. Thus, there was no way she would falter against him. Enraged by her words, he launched another furious assault, yet Shelly's thoughts were on Chrome, who was fighting an opponent far more dangerous. Knowing she'd dragged Chrome into this, she resolved to end her duel quickly to help him. On the other hand, Rado pressed forward with a powerful strike. Thus, Chrome couldn't block or take a direct hit since he'd be finished once pinned to the wall. Moreover, Rado's reach and strength also prevented him from closing the distance. Suddenly, Rado urged Chrome to reveal his true skill. At that moment, Chrome considered canceling his masquerade, but he noticed the people around. So with the priest and children watching, he could not reveal his monster form without frightening them. If that happened, Shelly might not be able to continue fighting either. Still, he wondered if he should abandon his restraint. Back in the dungeon, exposing himself as a monster would have only made things worse. But this time was different, and letting it end here was better than letting Rado and Jeff rampage. However, deep down, he just feared Shelly and the children would see his true self and recoil. Thinking of this, he realized he hid his monster form not for them, but for his own ego. Suddenly, Rado taunted that Chrome would die anyway, even if he refused to use his skill. With that, he summoned his lightning sword once more. Seeing this, Chrome was shocked to see him wielding two spells simultaneously. Moments later, the blade struck him. As a result, his arm was burned. Chrome's eyes remained locked on his opponent. Rado continued pressing forward, and was convinced that this next strike would finish everything, so he lunged and drove the lightning sword toward him. Seeing this, Chrome stood still and raised his weapon in defiance. Still, Rado declares that Chrome could never block such power with his feeble blade. The next instant, Chrome's sword shattered, and the blade pierced into his left abdomen. From the sidelines, the priest gasped and believed Chrome had lost. But looking at the wound, Rado realized that Chrome had deliberately avoided a critical hit. Even so, Rado assumed he was at death's door and prepared to end him. But when he tried to withdraw his blade, he could not, and it was stuck fast, as if trapped in stone. Looking closer, he saw Chrome's wound rapidly heal, trapping his sword, and his skin turning an unnatural color. Suddenly, Chrome seized the weapon and calmly declared that he had caught him. Rado's eyes widened as Chrome stayed composed despite the wound. Furthermore, he sensed something chilling and monstrous in his aura. In truth, Chrome had baited him all along by deflecting his strike and forcing him into a stab. At the last moment, he transformed his stomach's skin into that of a monster and triggered regeneration. Consequently, Rado began to demand to know what Chrome truly was, but Chrome's only response was to bare his claws. With a swift slash, he raked across Rado's face. The strike overwhelmed him, and Rado collapsed unconscious, so Chrome finally stopped. Meanwhile, Rado still couldn't believe he had been defeated. Ignoring him, Chrome pulled the sword from his stomach. On the other hand, the priest also struggled to believe Rado had lost. And like him, Jeff was in disbelief. At that moment, Chrome finally removed the sword. He pointed it toward Jeff and declared that he could still fight him. Shelley also pointed out that it was now 2 against 1. Seeing their swords, Jeff began to hesitate. Realizing he had no choice, he grabbed his neck and released a poison mist toward them. As Shelley covered her nose, she recognized it as a smoke screen. Moments later, they heard a loud crash and saw Jeff at the broken window shouting that fighting the evil dragons over a ruined church was foolish. After all, they made the rules in Oddfield, and no one should expect an easy death. As he escaped, he warned that they would regret crossing them. With Jeff gone, Shelley and Chrome were finally left alone. Relieved, Shelley sighed and noted that they had managed to drive them away for now. Chrome then began healing himself while wondering how he survived without exposing his true form. Looking at his wound, he wondered how he could keep fighting in human form. But then he thought that worrying about it would change nothing. After a while, the priest was finally assisted. He thanked Shelley and Chrome, though Chrome appeared somewhat uneasy. But the priest looked at the children, stressing that without him, something terrible could have happened. Moving on, he asked about Chrome's wound, and Chrome quickly assured him he had healing magic. However, regeneration nearly drained his MP, so he had to finish and return to the inn. Suddenly, Shelley told the priest that they could no longer stay in Oddfield. She emphasized that things had worsened, and the evil dragons might return, so they needed to move to the capital. However, the priest replied that they couldn't afford the cost of living there. Besides, bringing the children such a long distance would be difficult. Hearing this, Shelley reminded him of the evil dragon's danger and promised to help them if they left. But the priest insisted that they could manage on their own. He then said that what's more urgent was for Chrome and Shelley to leave immediately, since the evil dragons would target them now, especially after Jeff's threat. Knowing they valued appearances, he was sure they'd seek revenge. Hearing this, Chrome fell silent. Later outside, Shelley thanked Chrome and apologized for not helping him in the end. Following that, she asked what his next plan was. He replied he'd return to the inn for the day, then asked about hers. But this surprised her, and Chrome quickly realized he shouldn't have asked so casually, because she would never abandon the church even while being targeted by the evil dragons. Like him, Shelley knew this and thought of staying in the church to protect everyone, but that choice might only provoke the evil dragons to return. As the priest had said, they lacked resources to evacuate, and if she left, the children would be taken. Faced with this, she struggled to decide what she should do. Similarly, Chrome also pondered his next move and asked her about the Hole of Disaster. Shelley explained it appeared north of town and advised him to leave it alone. She recalled that knights were once sent from the capital to clear it out, but all 20 of them were wiped out. Hearing that, Chrome was shocked that even the nation's forces had been annihilated. Suddenly, Shelley added that ever since then, the country had ignored this city. With that, Chrome realized he must conquer the Hole of Disaster to free Oddfield from evil dragons. At first, he had only come here to find a place to level up, but he needed stronger monsters, and a dungeon that defeated the nation's knights was fitting. And if he let the evil dragons run wild, he couldn't rely on them against threats to the city. But if he defeated the dungeon boss, the nation's knights would suppress the evil dragons. Besides, he was as strong as a monster and confident he could grow stronger in the dungeon. With this resolve, he now aimed to save Oddfield and evolve into his next form. At the evil dragon's hideout, Jeff reported to their boss Galro that someone had interfered and defeated Rado. He also revealed the culprit was a gloomy kid named Chrome and urged Galro to punish him. After saying this, Jeff smiled and was convinced that Chrome would certainly regret opposing them even if he was capable. However, Jeff was surprised when Galro asked if he had fled after Rado was defeated. While gripping his weapon, Galro demanded to know how Jeff truly viewed him. Jeff quickly replied that Galro was an amazing and inspiring leader, but without warning, Galro swung his weapon and struck the ground beside him. He then corrected his question by asking if Jeff feared him or the brat named Chrome. Jeff immediately answered that Galro was the one he feared. Upon hearing this, he warned him never to tarnish the dragon's name and threatened to kill him if he did. In response, Jeff hastily agreed. After all, he knew Galro had risen to power through brutal methods and immense skill. Moreover, he is known as the Oddfield Monster, and one mistake could cost Jeff his life. Afterwards, Galro asked his commander Canelo why she had reduced the guards at the Hole of Disaster. He also demanded to know if she had his permission, but she stayed silent. So he warned her that failing to control a place would cause serious problems. She then explained that she had been prioritizing another emergency. She told him a few Kingdom Knights were spotted in town, with likely more nearby. Because of this, she had been busy investigating them. Hearing this, Galro cursed the Knights for daring to intrude. He declared that if they intended to make light of him, he would have no choice but to teach them a lesson. However, she cautioned him against rushing in recklessly. After all, it was unclear if the Knights targeted them or the dungeon, so she asked him to wait for her findings. Meanwhile, Chrome had made his way to the northern part of the city. There, he realized that the Hole of Disaster was not hard to find, as the dungeon that had tormented Oddfield was clearly visible. After half a day's rest at the inn, his mana and stamina were fully restored, so he was ready. However, he noticed some people nearby and wondered why they were out when the sun hadn't even risen yet. At that moment, a monster appeared with flames in its hands. Following that, it hurled fire toward a nearby building. Panicked, the people shouted that monsters had escaped the dungeon and begged for someone to fight them. Seeing this, Chrome realized the evil dragons weren't protecting them at all, so he ran. Suddenly, someone appeared claiming to be an adventurer and told them to secure the children. Another man also stepped forward and volunteered to protect the townsfolk, but before he could act, the monster targeted him with a burst of flames. While he stood frozen in fear, the lady raised a holy shield to block the attack. She then drew her sword and struck the monster, but it refused to retreat, so she told the man to step back since he was of no use. Meanwhile, Chrome continued moving unnoticed. Just then, the monster sensed him. Before it could react, Chrome landed a blow. However, this caught the lady's attention, so Chrome assured her that he would help, but she couldn't believe someone had severely wounded the monster, so she wondered if strong adventurers still lived in town. Still, Chrome's appearance made her suspect a link to the evil dragons. Pushing that thought aside, she urged him to stay focused. Chrome then raised his sword and clashed against the monster's claw. At the same time, the lady began to activate her holy sword. Seeing this, Chrome recognizes it as the holy version of Rado's spell and highly effective against corrupt monster mana. Meanwhile, the monster began to tremble in fear, but she pressed forward and cut it clean in half. As its body fell, Chrome marveled at her power because holy attacks were deadly to cursed monsters and could even purify him if he got too close. Meanwhile, the townspeople cheered her swift victory over the beast. With that, the man from earlier asked if she was a traveler because of her unfamiliarity. Yet her thoughts lingered, as her holy sword subtly reacted to nearby evil mana. A strange pull between holy and corrupted energy made her suspect Chrome. On the other hand, Chrome was relieved that no one was hurt, but the lady began to grab her sword and planned to test him. At the same time, Chrome thought the monster's level was high despite their victory. He was troubled that such monsters roamed freely, and the evil dragons meant to protect people were absent. Thinking about this, he felt that something was off. Meanwhile, the lady had no reason to doubt Chrome from his actions after his help with the monster. But holy mana shouldn't respond to an ordinary human. As she studied him, she noted how few high-level adventurers would visit this ruined city, so she decided she needed to confirm what he really was. At the same time, Chrome was still bothered by a vague uneasiness. Suddenly, a man patted him for doing a great job but startled him. Regardless, the man said the place would have burned if they hadn't been there, so he expressed how truly grateful he was to both Chrome and the lady. Soon, others gathered to thank them, but Chrome said it wasn't necessary. Besides, it was risky for him to be standing in front of so many people. Suddenly, a girl arrived looking for her father. the man immediately hugged his daughter Mallow. He also said he was safe thanks to Chrome and the lady, so she urged her to thank them. Immediately, Mallow eagerly praised them both for being amazing. Hearing this, Chrome felt embarrassed to be called a hero, but then the lady suddenly called out to him. Chrome quickly asked her what it was, but before she could answer, the monster nearby stirred again. It began summoning fire in its hand. Upon seeing this, the man was shocked that it was still alive. Meanwhile, the lady realized she missed the divine sign after getting distracted by Chrome's mana. Regardless, she dismissed it as pointless and raised her holy shield. With this, she intends to block the fireball and then pierce its eye. However, the monster looked around instead. Soon, it spotted Mallow. With a wicked smile, it directed its flames at the little girl. Seeing this, Mallow froze in confusion. At the same time, the lady realized the monster was taking the girl since it couldn't win. Chrome then prepared to move, but it was clear he would not make it in time, so his only chance was to reveal his monster form. Yet hesitation struck him, since if he undid his disguise here, his human facade would be destroyed in front of everyone. And if he could no longer stay in Oddfield, then he might never see Shelley again. With this in mind, he calls himself an idiot, but he remembered that his parents' deaths and his vow to improve the country made him an adventurer. With that resolve, he reached for his mask. The monster finally released its flame, and Mallow's father cried out her name in desperation. As the fire rushed closer, Mallow instinctively raised her hand to shield herself. An explosion followed, but the monster was confused by the situation, since instead of being consumed, Mallow opened her eyes. There, she saw that another monster shielded her from the flames, but when she caught sight of its face, she screamed in horror. Her father was also stunned and utterly confused, but Chrome wasted no time and charged at the monster. While the monster was still surprised, Chrome struck it directly. After that, Chrome gained 38 experience points. However, the townspeople believed danger remained because of his appearance. As Chrome stood there, the lady began to look at him with an intense expression. Meanwhile, the people were stunned by Chrome, and some of them hurriedly fled. But Chrome did not regret his choice. Still, he acknowledged that he had really messed up this time. Setting that aside, he began to look for the girl. When she noticed his gaze, she flinched. But Chrome was relieved to see that she was unharmed. However, her father quickly stopped him from looking at her and drove him away. Hearing this, Chrome fell silent, but he soon noticed someone approaching and swiftly blocked the sword of the lady. At the same time, the lady remarked that something really felt off about him, but she did not expect that he was truly a monster. In response, Chrome tried to explain that he was a shapeshifter, but she declared he was a wretched creature disguised as a human, even more dangerous than the previous monster. Hearing this, the people panicked and questioned why the evil dragons hadn't appeared. Regardless, they quickly took out their weapons and directed them at Chrome. Even so, Chrome felt fine since he only acted rightly without seeking reward. With that, he decided to run away. Thinking he was afraid of them, the people were relieved. Yet they still hurled rocks at him, and one of them struck his face. Seeing this, the lady quickly ordered them not to provoke him. She also realized Chrome was no ordinary shapeshifter, as he could speak. Still, she believed he must be killed since he is a monster blending into society. Just then, Mallow called out to her. She then asked if she truly intended to kill Chrome. In response, she explained that Chrome was a man-eating monster. Her father also reminded her that Chrome had always been a monster. Yet she found it strange, she pointed out to her father, including everyone that had seen what happened. Certainly, Chrome looked frightening, but he had fought the monster and protected the city. Still, her father insisted it was nothing more than coincidence. However, Mallow noted that Chrome had glanced her way, as if checking her safety. At this, the crowd fell silent. Even then, the lady planned to pursue Chrome. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her. A man called her Mira and asked what she was doing. He then reminded her that he had told her to keep a low profile. Mira replied that she had a good reason, but Captain Ellen ordered her back to not attract the evil dragons, but she insisted Chrome was dangerous. So Ellen warned that approaching the hole of disaster would alert the evil dragons and hinder their duty. With that, he reminded Mira that their mission this time was one of stealth above all else. Hearing this, Mira finally agreed. Later in an alley, Mira reported a demon appeared in town, and a shapeshifter joined mid-battle, but the creature was a highly intelligent individual, unlike ordinary monsters. Hearing this, Ellen asked why she fought the demon despite his order to stay low profile. Mira said people's lives were at risk, but Ellen reminded her their mission could save the entire nation. Gripping his sword, he told her to avoid the townspeople while pursuing their goal. He also pointed his blade at her and warned he could kill her if she interfered in his duty. Thus, Mira quickly apologized. At that, he sheathed his sword and told her to ensure it never happened again. Still, she asked about the monster, but Ellen dismissed it and would let it kill more people. However, his words left Mira speechless, so he explained that the abandoned city and dragons mattered little compared to their mission. Hence, the top priority was tracking the suspect behind the monster disaster, which is the Red Man. After saying this, he reminded her not to forget. Clenching her fist, Mira replied yes. Even so, Ellen's sharp gaze lingered on her. Meanwhile, Chrome finally stopped running. At last, he had reached the whole disaster and the source of Oddfield's suffering. Still, he could not stop thinking about how he could never return to Oddfield now that his identity had been revealed. Regardless, he resolved that it did not matter since his goal was to clear the whole of disaster. After it, Oddfield would be safe from monsters and the evil dragon. Also, he planned to level up, evolve, and gain skills strong enough to return to the capital. Meanwhile, at the church, the priest called after Shelley and warned her not to be reckless. But Shelley only apologized and explained that she had already made up her mind. As she ran, she thought the evil dragons and monsters were rampant, so she couldn't wait to feel strong enough. Worried for the children, she decided to protect Oddfield herself if knights and evil dragons can't. Determined, she vowed to clear the whole of disaster and save the town. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Chrome looked around. Suddenly, he recalled how this place had wiped out an entire squad of royal knights, so he reminded himself to stay cautious. Thus, he decided to advance slowly by taking days to level up and rest as needed. As he looked at himself, he realized surviving in the dungeon was a privilege only monsters had. Moving on, he saw the paths were complex and would need extensive exploration to find the boss. But with 2 routes before him, he hesitated on which way to go. To decide, he placed his sword upright on the ground and let it fall. He noticed it pointed to an entrance, and without guidance, he had to rely on chance. So he resolved to trust Rado's sword. Later, as he walked, his feet became entangled in a string. As a result, he stumbled and fell. Checking his legs, he found them caught in a massive spider web, but he dismissed it, thinking no spider could be large enough to spin such threads. Unexpectedly, 2 figures emerged, and they happened to be demon spiders. Shocked, Chrome realized they truly existed. Without warning, the spiders began summoning a magic circle to attack. He then tried to escape, but the webbing was too sticky to break free. Shortly after, the spiders unleashed stone bullets at him. Seeing them coming, Chrome hastily blocked them with his arms. At that moment, he realized the spider's tactic was to trap prey, then wear down from a distance. Determined, Chrome reached for his sword. With this, he is confident it could cut through the threads. But suddenly, one of the spiders spat out another sticky web. After getting caught, he muttered in frustration about their nasty fighting style. Soon, the spiders managed to trap his other hand as well, so he was shackled tightly. But he noticed the threads stretching from their mouths. Thus, he thought this might actually give him an advantage. With that, he tugged the strings on his hand and pulled them away. As a result, the spiders were forcefully yanked. As they flew through the air, their bodies collided with each other. Finally, they both released the strings from their mouths. While the spiders were still in shock, Chrome already had his claws prepared. Seeing their wide-open forms, he swiftly sliced them apart. After defeating them, he gained 138 and 108 experience points. Because of this, he leveled up to level 26. Later, seeing the high-level spiders, he thought leveling up here would be easy. He then checked his status and saw only 24 levels remained until his next evolution, which becomes sooner if he hurried. Though he wanted to evolve before confronting the boss, it seemed unlikely to happen soon. After all, he could level up with same-level monsters, but fighting stronger ones would be more effective. For that reason, he wouldn't mind if stronger monsters showed up. As he continued on his way, he suddenly heard a sound behind him, so he turned around. There, he saw glowing eyes shine in the darkness. Shortly after, a great demon spider appeared and stood at level 37. Seeing this, he exclaimed that he's not wishing for this high. But then the spider noticed him and charged in his direction. Fortunately, it slammed into the wall instead, but Chrome barely dodged its massive swift body and collapsed. Realizing the danger, he thought of escaping while he still had the chance. As he ran, he worried that a level 36 opponent could wipe him out like the Royal Knight squad. Yet the spider continued chasing after him. While running, he reasoned that such high level couldn't be everywhere and decided to lose it. Spotting a narrow path, he was certain that the spider's huge body wouldn't be able to fit. With that, he slipped into a small hole, but he was stunned by what greeted him. In front, web strings stretched across the passage. Seeing this, he realized the spider had lured him here with no way out. Soon after, the spider caught up. Following that, it peered into the hole, and its expression showed clear intent. With that, Chrome realized there was no running this time. Still, he had planned to take down stronger monsters eventually. Besides, he couldn't hope to clear the whole disaster without doing so. Therefore, it was now do or die, and he resolved to fight for his life. Not long after, the spider began to move. It slammed its body against the wall in front. Consequently, rocks flew as Chrome shielded himself from the debris. Suddenly, the creature raised its massive claw. Seeing this, Chrome began to feel nervous. Soon after, the spider lunged forward and forced Chrome to retreat quickly. Watching its movements, he realized it was fast but still trackable. Its enormous size also made its strikes less precise. Seizing the opportunity, Chrome stepped on one of its legs and launched himself into the air. From above, he brought his sword down in a powerful strike to cut its body. After damaging it, he noticed its large frame left its neck barely moving. With this realization, he knew the advantage was his and he could beat it. Suddenly, the spider opened its mouth. After that, it spat out a thread of blood-red energy. The attack shot forward at an incredible speed, but Chrome managed to dodge. While on it, he understood that this red thread was one of its deadly skills. Seeking cover, he moved behind a rock, but the spider continued to spew the attack, so it sliced the boulder in half. Witnessing this, Chrome marveled by its power. However, the spider shattered next to the boulder he was hiding at. Hence, he realized that a single strike from this skill could kill him instantly. So he had to stop the spider from using it again by forcing close combat. In addition, he planned to attack it relentlessly to stop the monster from using its thread. Before he could advance, it released another spider web. Chrome dodged frantically and was surprised by these huge spider web, but he is aware that even a single touch would immobilize him and seal his fate. However, he realized he could no longer approach recklessly. After all, he's been cornered, so dodging would soon become impossible in its next skill use. He is also tall in shapeshifter form to dodge, but being smaller might give him a chance. Suddenly, he realized that he could do that, so he began moving forward. At the same time, the spider released another web shot. Regardless, Chrome decided to activate his skill for the third time. Using Masquerade, his body immediately transforms back into human form. After that, he slid beneath the next volley of webs. Seeing this, the spider was confused, but Chrome continued to leapt into the air and drove his sword into one of its eyes. Due to this, the monster shrieked in pain. As blood sprayed from it, Chrome aimed to destroy the rest of its eyes, but before he could strike again, a claw swung toward him. Seeing this, he raised his sword in defense, but the impact sent him flying into the air. After getting his balance, he realized his defense had faltered during the assault, yet there was no time to recover. Suddenly, another stream of webbing shot forward. Seeing it getting closer, he raised his arm to block it. Consequently, the sticky threads wrapped tightly around his arm. Though he tried cutting it, his sword could not cut through. Suddenly, the spider tilted its head, so he was jerked violently into the air. While he dangled helplessly, he saw its jaws open wide. Seeing this, he is certain it's ready to consume him. Though it was a desperate situation, he also had an opportunity, so he can't hesitate anymore in this situation. With a swift strike, he severed his own arm. So when the severed arm was grabbed, it fell into the spider's mouth. As the spider chomped on it, Chrome couldn't help but pity the spider because his arm was actually naughty. In that instant, the detached arm's claw pierced into the spider's head. Chrome then seized the opening and lifted his sword. While on it, he declared that it's the time for the spider to die. His blade then drove deep to its head. With this, the spider could no longer retaliate. Shortly after, a notification informed him that he had gained more experience and reached level 33. It was only then that he fully realized he had won. At the same time, he wondered if luck, terrain, and the matchup made victory possible despite their level difference. Even so, gaining 7 levels at once was an unexpected but welcome outcome. After that, he approached the corpse of the spider and retrieved his severed arm. After he pressed it back into place, he activated regeneration and allowed the wound to mend. Once secured, he sat down and decided to rest for half a day to recover. As he settled, he realized he felt calmer in the dungeon because there's no people to deal with. With this in mind, he plans to continue as soon as his mana has recovered. After that, he continued fighting monsters. At the same time, he began to mark the walls as he traveled. Along the way, he fought countless monsters. Eventually, he checked his marks and realized he had already completed his 3rd lap around the area. Sitting again, he realized over a day had passed since entering the dungeon and feared he might never reach the deeper levels. Still, his growth was clear at level 37, but he feared getting stuck. Checking his status, he noted that both his stamina and mana had recovered, but he is now hungry, so he decided to eat another demon spider. While eating, he found it tasted like paint and spoiled blood, but filling his stomach outweighed it. But his meal was interrupted when he heard footsteps approaching. At first, he assumed it was another monster, but the echoing steps sounded human. However, he dismissed the thought. But meeting a lone person this deep could be disastrous. Taking no chances, he activated his masquerade skill. At that very moment, Shelley appeared and spotted what seemed to be a monster resting nearby. But her instincts said that if it were a devil, she should throw the spell stone and run. So she raised her hand to act, but she stopped abruptly when she recognized who it was. Immediately, she shouted Chrome's name in surprise. Just like her, he is equally surprised to see her. He then asked her why she was there, and how she made it this far with her level. In response, she unfolded a parchment and showed him a detailed map. Seeing this, his eyes widened as he realized it was a map of the dungeon itself. She also added that it mapped the passages and recorded the monsters in each region. Hearing this, Chrome could hardly believe such a thing existed. Setting that aside, she asked him what he was doing there. Chrome then explained he came to level up and challenged the dungeon boss afterward. On the other hand, he could easily guess her own reasons. It was likely tied to the orphanage, yet venturing here is near suicidal for her level. So he took the map and told her to exit the dungeon using the signs he had carved. However, she noticed his tone was colder than the last time they had met. Even so, she sensed worry behind his clumsy sternness out of fear for her safety. She also knew he wanted to conquer the dungeon alone and was cruelly sending her away, but she refused. With firm resolve, she declared that she could not turn back. She reminded him that no single adventurer could survive the dungeon that destroyed an entire night division. But Chrome argued she should leave, as she would only slow him down. Still, she begged him to let her fight alongside him. He then insisted she be a hindrance, but she assured him she could manage. She explained that Oddfield's people had studied the dungeon monsters to learn their weaknesses. For example, demon spiders feared crushed Kolchai seeds and Andre's holy blue light. On top of that, she revealed she had reclaimed her church donation to fund the journey. Hearing that, Chrome finally understood how she had managed to survive this far. Furthermore, she claimed knowledge of the dungeon's boss and insisted she could be useful. At this, Chrome realized he couldn't sway her and her information was too valuable. With 54 mana, he had 9 hours for Masquerade to defeat the dungeon boss. Hence, losing a bit of mana was worth Shelley's information and help. At last, he accepted her but warned that if she became a burden, he would send her back. Hearing this, Shelley agreed gladly. Meanwhile, at the evil dragon's hideout, Kainella reported the knights were disguised to seek the red-haired man. Hearing that, Galra was surprised that they were not the target. Suddenly, he heard Kainella say a lone adventurer girl entered the Hole of Disaster. But she dismissed the girl as a fool since no lone adventurer could survive there. Unexpectedly, Galro asked whether she had dealt with the intruder. Shocked, she admitted that she had not thought such an action necessary. Upon hearing this, he seized her by the neck. He then reminded her he had forbidden anyone from entering the dungeon. He feared the girl might be a disguised knight, and no risks could be allowed. After releasing her, he summoned his men and said he'd go to the dungeon. He also declared that anyone who ruins his paradise would face death and be fed to the monsters. Back in the dungeon, a group of spiders appeared. Their numbers made Chrome realize that protecting Shelley while fighting them would be difficult. Unexpectedly, Shelley stepped forward on her own. He tried stopping her by shouting at her, but she declared that she will blind them. So she hurled a pouch of Kolchai seed powder at one of the spiders. When powder exploded, it struck its eye and the creature shrieked in pain. Watching this, Chrome immediately noticed that its eyes changed color. The blinded spider then tried to strike, but its attack landed on a nearby rock instead. Confirming their blindness, Chrome raised his sword. After cutting through its body with ease, he gained 78 experience points. Later, after defeating the rest of the spiders, he advanced to level 38. Meanwhile, Shelley was relieved and noted the battle was going as planned. In response, Chrome admitted he hadn't doubted her but was surprised at her effectiveness. Afterwards, she informed him that the left entrance led to the dungeon boss. Hearing this, Chrome realized he should have explored the town more for the map. After all, he suffered while running in circles for over a day. However, Shelley clarified that travelers wouldn't easily find the map, which confused him. She then explains Oddfield's people risked their lives to map the dungeon and hide it from evil dragons. Looking at the map, she pondered the lives lost to chart it, and the risk of being confiscated by the evil dragons. Thus, the map held Oddfield's collected wish, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to get. Hearing this, Chrome sympathized with both the map's victims and the town that depended on it. Suddenly, Shelley admitted she trusted him and might share a copy of the map. With that, Chrome assured her that they will clear the Hole of Disaster. But this made her think he's truly kind after claiming he came only to level up. Not long after, multiple glowing eyes appeared in the shadows ahead. A figure then emerged with the upper body of a woman fused with the lower half of a spider. Immediately, she extended her hand to attack, so Chrome raised his sword to block. However, he realized that she is absurdly strong. As a result, he was sent crashing into the wall. Seeing this, Shelly shouted his name in surprise. On the other hand, the level 42 Archane laughed with maniacal delight. Seeing its level, Chrome realized terrifying monsters inhabited the dungeon's deeper region. Suddenly, Shelly warned him that the Archane was second only to the boss in strength. She also warned it could attack with webs, so he needed to stay close to fight. Taking her words into account, Chrome closed the distance to engage her directly. Shelly also noted the Archane's poor visibility near its feet, especially on the right blind spot. Following Shelly's guidance, he gets close to Archane's feet. After that, he raised his sword and struck Archane's limb. At the same time, Shelly remembered its weakness to fire, so she hurled a spell stone inscribed with fire runes. Immediately, the stone ignited and caused Archane to panic. Thus, Shelly confirmed Archanes were easily distracted by fire and had thin, severable limbs. Seizing the opportunity, Chrome closed in. He then lifted his blade and cut through the monster's left arm. While amazed by this, Shelly urged him to keep attacking to prevent its regeneration or skill use. However, the Archane was obviously already enraged, but soon after, its lifeless body laid on the ground. Seeing this, Shelly breathed a sigh of relief and recognized the fight was finally over. Chrome also realized the fight was easier than expected, as knowing its weaknesses turned the tide. With that, he earned 1,000 experience points and raised him to level 40. Seeing his rapid progress, Chrome checked his status and found only 10 levels left before evolution. At first, he doubted he'd reach it before the boss, but he felt it would come soon. Due to evolution, he turned from a skeleton into a human-like form with flesh and blood. So now he wondered if his next evolution would make him truly human. Setting that aside, he asked Shelly about the boss chamber, which the map showed was nearby. In response, she confirmed it. She added the boss was the devil monkey Orvis, and the one that had slain many knights and adventurers. But despite its reputation, she said it had a weakness Chrome could exploit to win. However, he could only hope to defeat Orvis while keeping his human form. Before moving forward, he urged a brief rest to recover their strength. Meanwhile, Shelly thinks of how they were close to saving Oddfield from the dungeon and the dragons. After all, the town had suffered endlessly, but the nightmare seemed close to its end. Meanwhile, outside the hole, the evil dragons gathered. A massive axe struck the ground, as Galro told his followers an adventurer girl had entered the dungeon due to their negligence, so he warned she must not succeed, or the city would regain power and their rule would fall. To prevent that, he ordered them to scour the dungeon, and promised to kill her himself if she lived. But she seems the townspeople's hope, so showing her shattered body would destroy their spirit and deter all resistance. Back inside the dungeon, Chrome and Shelly studied the map. Shelly pointed to the deepest layer of the dungeon, and marked the lair of the devil monkey Orvis. With that, Chrome knew defeating Orvis would end the dungeon disaster and free Oddfield. He then checked his status, and noted he had enough mana since Masquerade used little. Though he wanted to send Shelly back, he recalled the countless knights and adventurers Orvis had slain, so facing it alone seemed reckless. But with Shelly's knowledge, his chances were greater. Thinking of this, he tells her that he admits she guided him this far, but he still questioned whether she truly intended to press on. She replied she wouldn't since she had gathered survivors' knowledge and prepared countermeasures. Though her level wasn't enough, she could support by exploiting its blind spots, and she chose to fight with him. Realizing her resolve was firm, Chrome gave up on trying to dissuade her. Meanwhile, Shelly thought of those waiting in Oddfield, and was certain Chrome would conquer the dungeon for them. Determined not to burden him, she resolved to sacrifice herself if needed. As they advanced deeper, a sudden sound echoed through the passage. A massive figure then emerged ahead of them, and Chrome knew instantly who it was. Confirming its status, he verified that this was indeed the dungeon boss Orvis. Both of them then became tense, especially for Shelly, as this was the monster that had long tormented Oddfield. On the other hand, Chrome's eyes narrowed as he saw its level 52. Moreover, Shelly warned Orvis' claw swipes were lethal, and facing it head-on in human form meant instant death. Earlier, Shelly had explained that fighting Orvis directly was hopeless. Its speed was unmatched, which allowed it to close great distances in an instant, and countless adventurers had met their end beneath its claws. Hearing this, Chrome questioned its weakness, and she said Orvis was only fast in straight lines. That's because its feet were small compared to its massive body, so if they can make it change direction by zigzagging, its movements become sluggish. With this in mind, Chrome began to zigzag as he ran. At the same time, he closes the distance between himself and the beast. Noticing him, Orbis immediately lunged after him. So though it chased him as planned, Chrome admitted it was insanely fast. And even with poor turning, it still closed the distance alarmingly fast. As its claws slashed toward him, he recalled Shelly's instructions on how to handle its attacks. Knowing Orbis struggled with changing directions, he quickly darted to its side. So the beast's claws struck the ground instead. Following that, Chrome thought circling its flanks would buy time to dodge its attacks. However, Orbis grew more enraged. Still, Chrome continued narrowly evading since one strike would gravely injure him. Seeing its fist crush the ground, he felt grateful for Shelly's information, since without it he would likely have been sliced to pieces from the start. Suddenly, Orbis lunged at him again, but Chrome quickly dodged. As a result, its claws embed themselves into the wall. Spotting the opening they had been waiting for, he rushed forward. While on it, he planned to target Orbis' legs, which is its source of power and weakness. Raising his sword, he swung with all his strength and aimed for its footing. But when he looked up, he saw only a shallow slash across its leg. Realizing its hide was far tougher than expected, he quickly retreated. Earlier, Shelly told him Orbis was unstable, and wounding its legs would slow it down. Though he tried, Orbis was unfazed, and it seems he needed a heavier blow. At that moment, Shelly shouted that Orbis was not only fighting Chrome. She then charged in and thrusted her sword toward its back, but the blade couldn't even pierce its fur, and she felt it was like a solid metal. Consequently, Orbis roared furiously. It then whips around to attack. Though Shelly managed to evade, Chrome was struck and was thrown harshly against the ground. Seeing this, Shelly cried out his name in panic. Still, Chrome assured her he was fine, but his side was grazed, so he activated regeneration to heal the wound. But his status window warned of the skill's high mana cost, so he couldn't use it often. Still, the damage was expected, so he stayed calm. Moreover, he had to keep moving or Orbis would catch him for sure. As he dodged, he reminded himself Shelly hadn't used their trump card yet for him to attack. But Orbis' toughness unsettled him, and he doubted his human form could hurt it. So maybe his shapeshifter claws would work, but now he and Shelly fought Orbis up close. Besides, it was harder to hide behind the monster while attacking, and if he revealed his monster form, Shelly would panic and ruin their coordination. But if he couldn't hurt Orbis, they would both die here. With this in mind, he can't hesitate anymore. After all, he had known this risk from the moment he agreed to fight alongside Shelly. But suddenly, Orbis turned to Shelly. Seeing Orbis' intense gaze, Shelly became visibly nervous. Seeing this, Chrome grabbed a rock, knowing Shelly lacked the strength to escape. Without hesitation, he hurled the rock at Orbis, but the monster ignored it. Frustrated, Chrome shouted at Orbis and declared himself its opponent. After that, he struck at its snake-like tail. Irritated, Orbis turned its attention to him. It swiped with its claws, but Chrome managed to dodge. In that moment, he realized the tail took little damage, but as Shelly said, it drew Orbis' focus. Now the beast was chasing him again and forced Chrome to sprint in zigzags. For a while, Orbis couldn't catch him properly, but eventually it adapted and left no openings. Suddenly, it halted and unleashed its devil's poison breath. Seeing this, Chrome recalled the attack releases a deadly cloud and will make the area nearly unfit to fight in. Knowing that, he realized the monster had grown annoyed with his constant evasion. Though the breath doesn't last long, it covered a wide radius just as Shelly had warned. Yet they both knew this skill carried a critical flaw. At that moment, Shelly sprang into action. Pulling out another bag, she hurled it at Orbis. The beast slashed it apart with its claws and released a cloud of powder. While Orbis was confused, Shelly quickly shouted for Chrome to get down and hold his breath, to which he obeyed immediately. The powder then scattered into Orbis' face and forced it to inhale. As a result, the monster began coughing violently. Covering her nose, Shelly recognized the toxic parashroom powder, which could ruin a monster's throat, sight, and smell. With Orbis weakened, they counterattacked, and Shelly told Chrome to retreat as she readied a spell stone. Hearing this, Chrome quickly obeyed. She then flung the stone near Orbis, so the monster's tail quickly investigated it. The tail coil actually sensed heat in all directions, but matching human heat could actually deceive it. Besides, Orbis is already enraged and paralyzed, so was sure to fall for the trap. After some time, the tail finally reacted, so Orbis also reacted by furiously shouting. Watching it, Shelly saw that the tail viewed the stone as a small creature, and striking after it would throw the beast further off balance, which Orbis swiftly did. Spotting its wound, she aimed for the spot Chrome had already injured. With that, she successfully cut into its leg again. But Chrome moved as well, knowing Shelley lacked the strength to sever its leg with just a sword, so he chose to use his shapeshifter fangs that are less likely to be noticed by her. After sinking them into Orba's leg, he gnawed on its leg. Due to this, he tore off a chunk of flesh. In response, Orba screamed in pain, while Chrome casually chewed the piece. Not long after, Orba's collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Shelley exclaimed they had taken Orba's source of speed and agility. Still, Chrome acknowledged Orba's was stronger, but Shelley's tactics had cornered it. Now, they had already robbed it of its breath attack, dulled its senses, and crippled its mobility. With that, Shelley and him readied their swords to finish it off. Without hesitation, they struck together. Chrome thought the beast couldn't last long under their relentless assault, but he noticed smoke rising from its leg. To his dismay, Orba's was regenerating, but if it recovered now, they would have no cards left to play. Determined, he swung his sword, but Orba's blocked it with its arm. Following that, it countered with a crushing blow. Chrome barely managed to shield himself, so Shelley shouted his name in distress. Thus, the impact forced him to his knees and felt pain. Still, he wondered how the beast still had such strength while standing at death's door. Yet he knew they couldn't lose, because if they lose now, Oddfield will lose the last bit of hope it had, just as he had once lost his parents to tragedy. Gripping his sword, he told himself that he became an adventurer to face disasters like Orba's. With renewed resolve, he raised his sword again and leapt at Orba's. Witnessing this, Shelley froze in surprise. On the other hand, Orba's too refused to back down. As Chrome struck, Orba's raised its fist to stop him, but he redirected his blade at the last instant. Without further ado, he leapt towards Orba's again. As Chrome grew nervous, Orba's mirrored his expression, but their clash reached its peak as Chrome drove his sword straight into Orba's chest. Witnessing this, Shelley was clearly worried. After a while, Orba's finally collapsed to the ground. Catching his breath, Chrome wondered if they had truly won. Suddenly, he gained a huge amount of XP and leveled up to 47. Upon seeing this, he was surprised by the amount, but he concluded that it was really over this time. Meanwhile, Shelley still questioned if the boss had been truly defeated, but seeing Orba's lifeless body, her knees gave out and she sank to the ground. Tears then welled in her eyes as relief came, knowing Oddfield was finally safe. Seeing her cry, Chrome became worried, so she quickly apologized and said her tears appeared the moment she realized it was all over. She then admitted she thought fighting Orba's meant death, but she couldn't stand by for the church people. Therefore, she realized she'd never reach Orba's without Chrome, and the priest and children would have perished. But Chrome clarified that he would have been killed without her, so he told her he was truly grateful, which deeply touched Shelley. Meanwhile, Chrome thought the knights should drive out the dragons now that the hole was cleared. Setting that aside, he healed his arm with regeneration. However, he remembered he hadn't checked his mana yet, so he did quickly. While on it, he thought running out now would ruin the moment and likely panic Shelley. Upon checking, he found he had little mana left, but just enough to last until they got out. He had even kept his form hidden well, and he is just 3 levels from evolving. Knowing evolution neared a monster's ideal form, he hoped it would make him look more human. Shelley noticed him muttering and asked what he was doing. He brushed it off, saying he was just glad to level up, and noted she must have gained a lot too. She then replied that she had started at level 19 and was now 28. Thinking about it, she knew Frank at level 20 and Gil at level 19 would be shocked. Still, she admitted she hadn't contributed much and apologized for taking his experience, but he reassured her that she had fought more than enough to earn it. Hearing this, she slapped her cheeks lightly and reminded herself not to get too relaxed. After all, beating the boss didn't mean the monsters were gone, and they still had to survive the trip back. Afterward, they had to report to the capital so knights could drive out the dragons. Meanwhile, Chrome was beginning to feel exhausted, so he rested briefly before retrieving the boss's magic stone and saving mana for Masquerade. Upon hearing this, Shelley agreed, but in the next instant, she suddenly sensed danger, so she shoved Chrome aside, but he was confused by it. A moment later, a burst of flame struck her and sent her crashing to the ground. Horrified, Chrome called out her name. From the shadows, an evil dragon member scolded Canella for nearly burning Shelley, but she replied her target was Chrome. At the same time, Chrome lifted Shelley into his arms in confusion. As he looked at them, he asked why so many of the evil dragons were present in the dungeon. It was then that Galro appeared. He admitted Archane's corpse unsettled him, but he was shocked a mere adventurer defeated the devil monkey. Hearing his voice, Shelley felt scared because she recognizes him as the evil dragon's leader. On the other hand, Chrome was stunned by Galro's immense presence and inhuman size. Soon after, Jeff appeared and was shocked that the boy who once defied him had achieved so much. Yet he swore that Chrome's death would be painful, as he had once promised. Despite feeling weak, Shelley declared Orba's slain and the evil dragons reign over. She proclaimed they can't take revenge on them easily and warned them to flee before the knights arrived. But they only laughed, mocking her bluff and scoffing at two battered adventurers posing a threat. They also mocked the idea of taking pride in defeating a demon, since if Galro had wished, he could have destroyed the devil monkey with ease. But Shelley angrily denied it since countless sacrifices were made to bring the beast down. Yet they revealed the knights weren't destroyed by Orvas, but by the evil dragons themselves. They had deliberately spread false maps, led the knights into traps, and ambushed them while they were occupied with monsters. With cruel delight, they recalled tormenting the knights, and even harassing their women before their comrade. Hearing this, Chrome clenched his teeth in rage at their cruelty. Suddenly, Galro declared the evil dragons had no plans to abandon Oddfield. He said their rule would last as long as the world stayed unaware the hole was cleared, and at times, they would unleash monsters and make corpses to spread fear and control. To them, Chrome and Shelley had only asked them to kill a few more slaves before dying in vain. Hearing this, Shelley was unable to believe such depravity. Still, Galro issued his command. He ordered Chrome to be drawn and quartered, and Shelley to be used for their amusement. In the end, both would be fed alive to the monsters, and this fueled Chrome's fury. However, he knew there was no way Shelley had enough stamina to fight here. The same went for him, as he only had 17 mana points left. But seeing Galro and hearing their confessions made him think it was true. Suddenly, Shelley apologized and admitted she knew saving Oddfield was a far-fetched dream. Still, she had taken advantage of his kindness and dragged him into this. Hearing this, he couldn't help but clench his fist. He wondered why he was thinking of giving up, recalling that he had persevered despite learning his skill was weak. Even when reduced to a pile of bones, he persisted until regaining a temporary human form. And now he was only beaten up and attacked by bandits. Since he had already died once, he thought there was no reason to give up so easily now. Suddenly, Shelley noticed him moving. He then apologized for not being on guard, which caused her to take the hit meant for him. With that, he vowed it was now his turn to protect her. Hearing this, the ponytailed man advanced and asked if he'd still act cool after being cut to pieces. In response, Chrome blocked his attack with his sword. However, the man noticed that Chrome was shaky on his feet and quickly slashed his body. Seeing this, Shelley tried to stand, knowing Chrome would die at this rate. Suddenly, Jeff declared it was the end for them even if they'd gained levels. And once he killed them, he vowed to slaughter all the children in the church too. Seeing Shelley's shock, he added it was their fault for crossing the evil dragons. But this made Chrome grit his teeth in anger. Regardless, Jeff said he might spare the priest until he despaired and soiled himself. Hearing this, Shelley slumped to the ground and apologized to the children and the priest. Meanwhile, Chrome clung tightly to his sword and raised it against the ponytailed man. However, Jeff deflected it and sneered that he never said he'd fight him alone. The others then prepared their bows. After realizing it, the volley of arrows strikes Chrome's body and leaves him momentarily stunned. However, Jeff warned him to stay alive, as they planned to feed him to the monsters. Thinking of cutting Chrome's left arm first, he raised his sword, but when the blade descended, it clashed against Chrome's hardened claw instead. Shocked, Jeff saw Chrome's hand turn to solid rock and wondered what skill it was. But in response, Chrome punched him, so as he staggered back, he realized that Chrome still retained immense strength. Meanwhile, Shelley was confused, knowing Chrome only for his healing and not of such power. But the more disturbing was his arm, and this filled her with dread. On the other hand, Galro found the development intriguing. Meanwhile, Chrome successfully tore out the arrows lodged in his body. Suddenly, he recalled Shelley saying he wasn't a bad person. Though her trusting personality seemed foolish, it gave him courage to leave the dungeon. When they first reunited in Oddfield, he panicked and thought it a terrible encounter. Yet she had chased after him, which had left him both surprised and grateful. Even so, he worried she'd feel deceived if she saw his true form, but he also knew that now was not the time for fear. Turning back to his enemies, Chrome questioned why they were hesitating to strike. Hearing this, the man confirmed that Chrome still had an ace up his sleeve, but the games were over, so he lunged while declaring he'd send Chrome to hell. However, Chrome calmly gripped his mask and told him to try. Pulling it into place, he declared that he would drag his opponent down with him. With that, he unleashed his masquerade skill. The ponytailed man still charged forward with all his strength, but in the next instant blood sprayed everywhere as his body was sliced in two. After his body fell to the ground, Chrome gained 567 experience points. Witnessing this, Jeff was still shocked that he transformed. Just like him, Kaynella couldn't accept that such a form was merely the result of a skill. Meanwhile, Chrome felt disturbingly natural killing a man, despite never having done so before. He thought that it must be because his own life is in danger, or perhaps it was because he had truly become a monster. With that, the evil dragons abandoned capturing him alive and decided he must be killed. On the other hand, Shelley was still frozen in shock. Noticing her reaction, Chrome silently apologized for deceiving her. But even if she had been wrong about him, he resolved to defeat their enemies. Without further ado, he rushed toward the enemies. Seeing him, they tried to finish him off with their arrows, but not a single shot pierced him. Realizing he was too tough, they discarded their bows. They then switched to swords instead. Meanwhile, Chrome seized an opportunity to heal with regeneration. But after checking his HP, he knew a direct sword hit would finish him. However, with many holding back, he thought the frontliners couldn't seriously harm him. Additionally, his stronger form, deadly claws, and heightened strength gave him a risky option. Suddenly, a man lunged at him with a wooden club while calling him a monster. Looking at him, Chrome saw his fear, and he could use it to his advantage. He then quickly blocked the strike with his arm. At that moment, another man thought he was open so he could attack. Unexpectedly, the ground beneath Chrome cracked, and he let out a deafening scream. Hence, the pressure froze the attacker in place. In that moment, Chrome slapped his sword aside. Following it, he immediately used his claw to behead the man behind him. Aside from that, he rushed at the one with the wooden club and struck him hard in the face. But Chrome didn't stop until the man's face was completely crushed, and gaining more XP in the process. After the brutal fight, he leveled up from 47 to 48. Watching this, Galro gritted his teeth in anger. Meanwhile, his subordinates were shaken by Chrome's sudden surge in strength. Canella also saw the danger and noticed the men's waning will to fight. Watching Chrome, she saw he'd abandoned hope of surviving and focused on taking down as many as possible. With this in mind, she realized the situation had become truly dire. Suddenly, the men shouted it was no job for Small Fry in advance. With that, Canella and her colleague activated magic circles beneath their feet. Still, Chrome faces their attacks, one after another. While Chrome was surrounded, the mage man tried to raise his hand at them. However, he could not shoot because his allies were in the way. While Canella and he were hesitating, Canella noticed Chrome's gaze. She then realized that he was purposely positioning himself so they could not shoot. Meanwhile, Chrome continued fighting the opponents in front of him, but he found that these two were much stronger than the first group. At the same time, the mages were also aiming at him. Besides, he was at his limit and did not have enough strength left to take down all of them. But as he looked at Galro, he finally knew what to do next. With that, he continued fighting the one in front of him and gained 396 XP. But he was stabbed by one of them because he was wide open. Thus, the man thought that they had finally gotten Chrome. But to his surprise, Chrome stabbed him using his claws. With the man still on his claw, Chrome advanced toward Galro's direction. Seeing this, Canella began to feel scared. Noticing this, the other mage reminded her not to falter. Following that, he cast fire magic to blow away Chrome. Seeing this, his ally ordered him not to shoot, but he had already released the fire, and it directly hit his ally. Seeing the area burning, the mage nervously laughed. However, the only one burning was his ally. On the other hand, Chrome was alive and even gained experience points to level up to level 49. Seeing Chrome, he was surprised that he was still alive, but he thought that he might be able to shoot Chrome from his current position before his claws reached him. But Chrome grabbed the sword behind his back and slashed the mage, which made him gain another 674 experience points. After that, he threw the sword and came after Galro. Seeing Galro, he thought killing him might break the evil dragons and even drive them from the city. However, Canella quickly shouted at Galro to warn him. Meanwhile, Chrome thought that Galro killing Orbaz alone was not a bluff. With his remaining strength, he doubted he could defeat Galro, who revealed he was called the Monster of Oddfield. On the other hand, Chrome was an actual monster. With that, he suggested putting to the test which of them was the true monster. Immediately, Galro advanced with his axe. Chrome managed to dodge the first swing, but another one followed quickly, forcing him to barely evade the attack. After creating some distance, Chrome realized that Galro's strikes could have easily taken his head off. Moreover, Galro was level 50, so Chrome knew he had little chance of winning. Even so, he didn't mind killing each other to free Oddfield, but he needed to seek an advantage. He then focused on Galro's axe and planned to remove it to eliminate his reach disadvantage, and without the weapon, his claws would give him the upper hand. With this plan in mind, he used the last of his mana for regeneration. As a result, his left arm is restored in full condition. Galro then continued harassing him, and mocking that he wasn't even half as strong as expected. But when the axe struck against Chrome's arm, Galro was shocked to see that Chrome had actually stopped it. Chrome then seized the opportunity to strike and rushed toward him. However, Galro managed to dodge, but instead of retreating, Chrome bit down on the axe and hurled it away. Witnessing this, Galro realized that Chrome had been pretending to target him all along. Almost out of strength, Chrome prepared to finish the fight with his claws. After all, he could not allow Galro to recover or wait for his subordinates to interfere. However, Galro just smirked. He then enveloped his arm with his purple crystallization skill. With a single blow, he punched Chrome in the face and sent him crashing into the ground. He then revealed that his skill covers him in an armor of sturdy crystal. Knowing that, he asked Chrome how he liked it, though he was still stronger even unarmed. Hearing this, Chrome thought bitterly that it was unfair. Galro could grow crystals at will and use them as a shield, making him wonder how to overcome such a defense. As Chrome lay on the ground, Galro considered making him suffer through fear. Suddenly, he remembered being born to a hopeless hoodlum and a mother beaten for being a useless escort. At one point, his mother told his father it was because of the scars he left on her. Hearing this as blame, his father responded by beating her even more. After that, his father told him to take work already by stealing or begging for money. Believing Galro was useless, his father grabbed him by the neck. In that moment, Galro thought his father would kill him, but not only him, but also his mother. Unexpectedly, Galro managed to fight back and beat his father. On the day he thought he'd die, he realized he had activated his skill for the first time. Overjoyed, he told his mother that they no longer needed to be afraid of his father. To his shock, she called out for her husband instead. As Galro stood still watching them, his mother suddenly called him a monster. Though surprised by her words, Galro suddenly smirked, and blood soon covered his crystallized hand. After killing both of his parents that day, he became known as the Monster of Oddfield. Back in the present, Chrome neared his limit, with none of his skills able to save him. As Galro approached, Chrome wondered if this was the end. Then his eyes caught sight of the sword lying behind Galro. Seeing it, he thought it was his only way out. So when Galro attacked, Chrome quickly dodged by rolling forward to his side. After that, he continued rolling forward across the ground for the sword and successfully seized it. Seeing it in his hand, Galro mocked him by asking how the weapon could possibly save him from death. But Chrome did not answer and simply held the sword tightly. Meanwhile, Jeff praised Galro's strength after doubting him. Regardless of that, he now urged him to finish Chrome. Without warning, Chrome hurled the sword into the air. Galro then laughed and mocked him for losing his aim, but Chrome had not actually aimed for him. Moments later, the sword came down and pierced Jeff's chest. Stunned, Jeff struggled to question Chrome's intention, but he soon collapsed and died, which helped Chrome gain experience points and level up from 49 to 50. Witnessing this, Galro wondered if this was just an act of desperation. Looking at Chrome, he thought the sword had accomplished nothing. But what he did not know was that Chrome had finally fulfilled the condition to evolve. Looking at himself, Chrome no longer cared about becoming human for this evolution. Now all he wanted was power to defeat Galro and to save Shelley and free Oddfield. With this in mind, he accepted any form, no matter how grotesque, as long as it gave him strength. Soon, his body began to transform. Seeing this, Galro watched uneasily and sensed a strange, overwhelming mana surrounding Chrome. Shortly after, Chrome stepped forward and revealed his new form as a doppelganger. This doppelganger terrifies with illusions, drives people insane, and mimics others by stealing their appearance and memories. With his evolution, Chrome gained the skills Phantom and Dream Eater. Meanwhile, Galro grew enraged that Chrome had evolved in such a situation. Regardless, he advanced with full force to put an end to the fight. Yet Chrome easily caught his arm. Using his hand, he activated Dream Eater and slashed Galro with his claws. Galro then staggered backward. At the same time, he felt an unsettling swirl in his head like his strength was being drained. Soon, he realized Chrome had stolen his mana and used it to regenerate. Ignoring him, Chrome thought of how Dream Eater let him steal mana to heal himself. Knowing he could keep fighting forever like this, he pressed forward. Meanwhile, Galro grew cautious after realizing he could no longer take the fight lightly. So he then ordered Kainella and the others to kill Chrome. In response, the archer immediately readied an arrow, while Kainella summoned a magic circle. However, Chrome was certain their efforts would be useless. When the eye on his hand opened, he activated Phantom, which projected illusions to manipulate those who feared him. Moments later, Chrome's body appeared to be struck by an arrow. Soon, Kainella's fire spell followed and hit him directly. Believing she had succeeded, Kainella rejoiced, but his body began to distort before her eyes, and to her horror, it revealed Galro's body instead. Panic then overtook her as she realized what had happened. Meanwhile, Galro crushed the arrow angrily and questioned who they had been aiming at. In that moment, Chrome's claws slashed across his face. By then, Chrome had fully recovered his stamina and neutralized Galro's subordinate. Now he was convinced that Galro's end was near. However, Galro grabs Chrome and declares himself the true monster of Oddfield. But Chrome slipped past his punch with ease and seized his hand in return. At that moment, Galro noticed a strange light from Chrome and suspected another illusion skill. Hence, he thought Chrome's form aimed to instill fear, but he believed he could resist it. Abruptly, Chrome unleashed Phantom again. Galro then realized he was about to be subjected to another trick, but when he looked, he suddenly saw the image of his father. Suddenly, the apparition accused him of daring to kill him. Though Galro laughed, his trembling legs betrayed him. He then raised his fist and convinced himself that he was no longer powerless, so he struck what he thought was Chrome in order to drive the memory away. Seeing Chrome collapse, Galro declared no illusion could defeat him. But to his surprise, the body turned into his mother's image from the day he killed her. Fear then overwhelmed him, and he wondered what was happening. In an instant, he was transported to a room and his hands appeared normal once more. Confused, he ordered Chrome to stop and insisted he could never be defeated by illusions. A shadow then emerged and asked why he killed his father. The shadow then said he deserved his limbs torn off and fed to dogs. At that moment, Galro realized his strength was gone and his skills unresponsive. Panic surged in him, and he tried to order the shadow to keep away from him. But in reality, Chrome had been relentlessly striking him with his claws. As a result, his body finally collapsed to the ground. After defeating Galro, Chrome gained more experience points and leveled up to level 51. Realizing this, he concluded that he had finally defeated the boss of the evil dragons. Looking at his third evolution as a doppelganger, he acknowledged its overwhelming power. His two new skills also let him consume memories and steal mana from those he touched, as he did to Galro. Turning his attention to the others, Chrome saw Kainella calling out to Galro in fear. At the same time, the others realized they were finished since their leader had also been defeated. Suddenly, Chrome let out a terrifying screech. Horrified, they panicked and ordered him to stay away. At the same time, they all flee in fear. With that, Chrome succeeded in killing Orbis, and the boss of the evil dragons, along with several of his subordinates. Without their leader, Chrome doubted they could carry out Galro's scheme against the knights. At last, Oddfield was safe and the children could live in peace once again. With the battle over, Chrome turned his gaze toward Shelley, but he only sees her staring back at him with fear. Immediately, he understood her confusion since her adventurer companion was actually a monster. With that, he turned his back on her. As he walked away, he accepted how shocking it must have been for her, but it was fine. Besides, others had already seen him transform, so he could no longer stay in Oddfield. But if she'd only heard rumors he was a monster, she wouldn't have believed them and chased him. But now that she had seen the truth with her own eyes, and it was better this way. As these thoughts weighed on him, he realized he could never return to civilization, not just Oddfield. Though he's just running away, he was already a dead monster, and meeting his sister would have ended this way eventually. Still, he refused to see himself as a tragic hero because having once been weak, saving a city was enough. Meanwhile, Shelley bit her lip and forced herself to stand. Seeing this, Chrome glanced back at her. To his surprise, she suddenly hugged him from behind. Startled, he wondered what she was doing. Then, Shelley began to apologize and confess she's unsure what to think. Yet seeing how lonely he looked, she felt the need to embrace him. Hearing this, Chrome was left quietly stunned. Regardless, she admitted she was scared and unsure of what was happening. Still, she was certain he was a good person, and that was all she knew for sure. Hearing this, he felt somewhat touched. Meanwhile, Shelley finally understood why Chrome had come alone into the dungeon, and why he always seemed afraid of being seen. Because he was hiding the fact that he was a monster, he couldn't casually interact with people. Yet he ventured into the dungeon with her to save the town, so she reminded him he had saved Oddfield. She also promised to help him stay in town after noticing his loneliness, but if she couldn't, she would still stay by his side, though she seemed about to faint. Seeing her about to collapse, he quickly caught her. At that moment, she realized she had only grown dizzy from shouting, so she apologized and explained that she was simply tired. Watching her fall asleep, he noticed that she was not only injured but also utterly exhausted. Yet despite that, she had stood up just to tell him those words. Because of this, he thanked her because her encouragement meant a lot. Still, he thought it best for her to forget him for fearing he might bring her trouble or danger. As he summoned power, he realized Dream Eater not only let him see others' dreams but also manipulate them. With that, he thought he could erase himself from her memories. However, he couldn't help but recall how she had noticed his loneliness, and this made him hesitate. Later outside, Shelley was woken up by people asking her what had happened. In confusion, she asked where she was. They then explained they heard a monster's roar outside town, rushed over, and found her. Hearing this, she slowly recalled entering the Hole of Disaster, fighting Orbas and being attacked by the evil dragons. Then another thought struck her, so she asked them where the man with white skin was, but they replied that she was the only one they had found. Meanwhile, on a cliff, Chrome thought it best not to get too involved with people, and yet he knew there was no way he could erase Shelley's memories. 2 days after the Hole of Disaster was cleared at the guild, the adventurers discussed the devil monkey's defeat and no longer fearing monster attacks on the town. Furthermore, they also heard from the capital that a new feudal lord would arrive soon. Knowing this, they cheered and vowed to celebrate Shelley's victory over the devil monkey yearly. Hearing that, a man asked if Shelley defeated the devil monkey, but she said she was only there. However, the one who actually took it down was nowhere to be found. Nevertheless, news of the Hole's boss's defeat spread quickly, and monsters were expected to stop emerging. Moreover, most of the evil dragons had already left the town as well, so as she watched the celebrations, she thought peace would soon return to Oddfield. But all of this was thanks to Chrome, and yet he had disappeared. With this in mind, she could not help but think of Chrome as the true savior who had liberated them. Meanwhile, a man in a robe was silently looking at a wanted poster. Noticing him, a girl approached and asked if he was going to drink, but he refused. Hearing this, she called him boring since they'd been celebrating a new hero's birth for days, and yet he just stared at the wall, and this made her wonder if the poster was that interesting. Seeing the poster, she noted it showed a monster that attacked a child and could take human form and speak. As she drank, she noted that clearing the dungeon didn't make them completely safe. Suddenly, they were interrupted by Shelley, who noticed the man in the robe. As she approached him, she asked if he was Chrome, but the man removed his hood and revealed a different face. Seeing this, she quickly apologized and said he reminded her of someone important. Later outside, the man in the robe silently apologized to Shelley. Waving his hand, he revealed his true face that was hidden by Phantom to avoid being seen as a monster. With this, Chrome silently bid farewell to Shelley and thanked her for giving him the courage to meet Clamia. Setting that aside, he saw his mana had doubled, and that the doppelganger was mainly a spellcaster. Furthermore, he realized he could now stay transformed for more than a day with his masquerade, and if discovered, he could use Phantom or Dream Eater to hide or erase memories. With this, it should be perfectly possible to see Clamia now. With that, he will try to return to his hometown Rockdat. Meanwhile, inside an office, two people were having a discussion. One of them asked the red-haired man if he really could control the dungeon disaster. In response, the red-haired man named Asher assured Mito that the Claws of Devon had long studied dungeons and could now control their disasters. Hearing this, Mito noted their power over the world and asked why he came to him, not the royals. Asher then explained it was because Mito knew how to respect a dedicated researcher. Though confident he'd be hailed a hero, he feared being discarded once his purpose was served. Moreover, they would forget their gratitude and treat them as obstacles if in the way. But with control over dungeon disasters, Asher saw ruling from the shadows as more appealing. Unfortunately, they did not possess the necessary influence to get started. With that, he looks at Mito and tells him they would make him king, with the Claws of Devon serving him. Hearing that, Mito considered this and found Asher to be an interesting man. That's because Asher had the power to save all but chose to become a devil. In response, Asher said God set the world's rules so the difference was minimal, but he admitted claiming full control over the disasters was an exaggeration. He added that they still needed preparations, impure mana, and favorable abyss conditions. However, Mito said he wouldn't support them until they proved their worth. Asher accepted this as natural, then pulled something from his coat. He then showed a map of Hadwin as their starting point, but it had trade issues, and it's because of the bigger city of Rockdat. But a dungeon disaster in Rockdat would redirect trade and money to Hadwin. With this in mind, Asher said preparations were underway and their abilities would soon show. Hearing this, Mito smiled and said that he was looking forward to it. That night in the forest, a level 16 third eye appeared. Seeing this, Chrome thought it was the perfect chance to test his skills. Suddenly, the third eye lunged forward, but he managed to dodge. He then extended his hand, but the monster rushed at him again. Quickly, he touched it and used his Soul Eater skill. However, the third eye only growled and tried to strike back, so Chrome was forced to hit its head in haste. After distancing himself, he had actually planned to use Soul Eater to confuse enemies, but he realized that if they struck first, he wouldn't get a chance even against this low-level opponent. Thus, he had to defeat his enemies before tampering with their memories. As he moved, he thought of draining nimble enemies' mana. With this in mind, he slashed the third eye with his claws, but he gained only 3 XP, so though he expected less experience from lower-level opponents, the result still troubled him. so now he wondered if he would ever grow stronger at this pace. Setting that aside, he examined the unfamiliar monster, an unusually high level for being near town. While feeling uneasy, he hoped it wasn't a bad omen. Later by the bonfire, he gnawed on the creature's meat. As he ate, his thoughts drifted toward Rokdak. Knowing he can use monsters to cover Masquerade's mana cost, he resolved to stay in human form. After all, he avoids revealing his true self to prevent panic, and because staying in that form clouded his mind. Clenching his fist, he prayed Clamia would wait since he was finally heading home. Meanwhile at the tavern, Arthur slammed his mug of beer on the table. His companion then urged him to stay calm since recruiting new members was naturally challenging, but Arthur insisted he was certain they were being deliberately avoided. However, this made his companion confused. Previously, Clamia confronted them by pointing they were the last seen with her brother entering the dungeon. Upon hearing this, Arthur nervously asked what she was implying. She then decided to be frank, so she stressed that they had taken brother deep into the dungeon, then escaped and left him behind. Remembering this, Arthur believed Clamia's rumors were why no one hired them. Shakily, he added that he felt people had been talking about them because of her. Hearing this, the man noted that Arthur had acted strangely ever since. Unexpectedly, Arthur slammed his cup down and warned him not to talk about that. Moreover, he also insisted it wasn't his fault. After all, he didn't know imps lured people, and he blamed Chrome for going too far. With that, he insisted they'd have died otherwise, prompting the man to calm him down. Still, Arthur muttered to himself that he wasn't wrong and he wasn't a murderer, so he couldn't bear the thought of Clamia looking at him that way. Thinking of her, he vowed to never forgive her for spreading those rumors. Meanwhile in the dungeon, a woman happily exclaimed how wonderful it was. Gazing at the dungeon boss Fenrir, she thought her master was a genius for making the dungeon boss so powerful in under 100 days. Suddenly, Fenrir roared at her. Annoyed by such bad manners, she reached behind her and pulled out a crystal. The moment she revealed it, Fenrir quickly became obedient. Seeing its reaction, she explained that the crystal contained her master's mana. At once, Fenrir was subdued. With that, she told it to come along to fulfill their master's wish. After saying this, she flashed a wild smile and told Fenrir they were going to Rokdak. Meanwhile at Rokdak, Chrome finally arrived, so he planned to find his sister and use his illusion skill if arrested. With this in mind, he reassured himself that he seemed completely normal. However, a drunkard noticed him loitering around and wondered if he was a thief. Meanwhile, at home, Clamia was busy reading a book. After a while, she managed to form a bird with her ice creation skill. Still, she thought she still needed to be faster and more accurate. Unbeknownst to her, Chrome was watching her practice late into the night. Thus, Chrome wondered what to do next. He then thought of how he could explain himself without showing his true form. In addition, he wondered how he could say goodbye after quickly showing himself. But watching her, he saw that she seemed fine and thought that just seeing her safe was enough. Meanwhile, Clamia just finished her practice and sighed in exhaustion. Seeing this, he noted she was training hard and wondered if it was for a promotion interview. Suddenly, she stood up, so he watched her curiously. Unexpectedly, she picked up a dagger, but Chrome immediately recognized it as the dagger he had left for her. Suddenly, she hugged it and whispered for her brother to wait for her to find him. Surprised, Chrome couldn't hold back anymore and shouted her name. Hearing this, Clamia instantly raised the dagger toward him. However, she soon realized that it was her brother. Knowing this, she exclaimed in confusion that he was actually alive. Upon hearing this, Chrome felt guilty. Afterwards, she began scolding him for hiding all this time and for not contacting her. She also demanded why he went to dangerous places and the trouble he caused her, but she faltered and wondered why she was shouting instead of saying what she truly felt. Suddenly, Chrome apologized and admitted she was right, which surprised her. He then stepped closer and acknowledged she had been worrying and searching for him all this time. Touched, she hugged him and told him that she had indeed been looking for him. Hearing this, Chrome couldn't help but smile. Later, he asked her to listen and revealed that he needed to leave again soon. In response, she asked why he had to leave again just after coming back. He then apologized since he wasn't confident he could put it into words. Besides, he was now an undead, and something terrible might happen if he stayed with her. Still, he hoped to become human in his next evolution and believed he could recover from his last monstrous transformation. And then, he should already be at a pretty high level when that comes. Years ago at the cemetery, he thought his skill was useless for adventuring and considered giving up. At that time, Himela was crying over their parents. Seeing her like that, he approached her. He then vowed to become a hero and change the world to protect her and others. With that vow, he asked her not to cry anymore. Now, he has grown stronger with each evolution, and his undead curse has fueled his continued growth. With this thought in mind, he finally stood up. He also apologized to Camilla and promised to return when he was strong enough. As he left, Camilla called out and asked him to wait, but when she opened the door, he was nowhere to be seen. Realizing he had suddenly disappeared, she was left in shock. Still, she shed tears after seeing him act alone despite his weakness. With that, she slumped to the ground and prayed that her brother would not make her worry so much. Meanwhile, Chrome witnessed all this and felt relieved that they had met again. As he walked away, he thought Camilla shouldn't risk searching for him. However, he unexpectedly bumped into someone and immediately apologized. In response, Arthur glared at him and asked where he was looking. Seeing him, Chrome's eyes widened, and the memory of being abandoned by Arthur came rushing back. Shocked, Chrome called out Arthur's name, and Arthur also recognized him. So Arthur quickly pointed out that he thought Chrome was already dead. Meanwhile, at Rockdat's watchtower, a guard was sleeping soundly, but he was suddenly woken by a noise. Realizing it came from the large Mana sensor, he assumed it must be some kind of mistake, but as he checked the window, he was stunned. Not far away, countless monsters were approaching. Seeing this, he wondered if it was some kind of cruel joke. Still, this could be a catastrophe for Rockdat and he must warn the others, but a girl suddenly appeared behind him. Upon seeing her, he quickly used a spear to stab her. As a result, the girl spat out blood and fell to the ground. However, she simply wiped the blood and called him mean. She also added that she couldn't believe a grown man like him would stab her without hesitation. Hearing this, the level 24 Kevin soon noticed that she seemed perfectly fine no matter how much he stabbed her. With that, he speculated that she must be a much higher level than him. Still, he urged her to move away because the monsters were approaching the town, and if he could not alert the people, many lives would be lost. But she only replied that she already knew, and that she was the one who brought the monsters after all. Hearing this, Kevin was stunned, but he also thought it was impossible that she was the one who summoned those creatures. Suddenly, she raised her side and said it didn't matter that she revealed it because she was going to kill him. Still, Kevin steadied himself since his attacks had hit her, and victory was possible despite her higher level. With his spear in hand, he declared that it was his duty to protect the people. He then shouted that he could not lose here. Seeing his incoming attack, she simply smiled. Following that, she leapt to avoid his spear. Before Kevin could even turn to face her, she struck his back with her scythe. At that moment, he realized how agile she was and wondered how his attacks had ever hit. Soon after, Kevin collapsed to the ground. She then finally remarked that she just liked a little pain herself and that this was fun. Pointing her scythe at him, she apologized for raising his hopes. After that, she asked how the city's fighters would respond to monsters from the south. Hearing this, he understood she wanted to deal with them first, just as she did with him, so he cursed her. In response, she stabbed his back with her scythe. Realizing the blade had struck bone, he began muttering that he did not want to die, but she just smiled. Following it, she began healing him and leaving him confused why she'd save an enemy. Suddenly, she continued to ask where in the first place the city would try to defend. Hearing this, he realized that she was toying with him in order to make him spill information. Still, he kept muttering that he couldn't die yet, but she continued stabbing and healing him over and over. Eventually, Kevin was completely exhausted from the torture. Seeing that he didn't want to die yet, she continued asking how the others would defend, but he only repeated that he couldn't die until he had warned everyone because it was his duty. At that, she sighed. She then called him boring and left him lying on the ground. Watching her leave, Kevin wished for someone to hear his final plea, and that is for someone to protect Rockdat. Meanwhile, outside, Arthur kept shouting that Chrome should have died when eaten by bugbears, so he demanded to know how Chrome was still standing in front of him. Hearing this, Chrome realized he had run into someone troublesome. Hence, he wondered if he should have used his illusion skill, but it drained too much mana, so instead, he regretted not being more careful to avoid people he knew. Suddenly, Arthur considered the possibility that Chrome had revived using a revival skill. Still, he thought it's impossible that Chrome could have escaped alone from the dungeon. Besides, he hadn't seen him until today. On the other hand, Chrome thought Arthur was the last person who should blame him. But then he noticed something off. He noticed Arthur's pale sunken face with dark circles, and wondered if he'd taken a drug. Suddenly, Arthur drew his sword. Surprised, Chrome questioned his actions, but Arthur only declared that Chrome had returned as a monster to kill him. Chrome then quickly denied it, though Arthur was half right. Still, Arthur insisted that Chrome held a grudge against him for throwing him to the bugbears, but this only deepened Chrome's suspicion that something was truly wrong with him. But knowing that a crowd would soon gather, he knew he had to deal with Arthur quickly. However, Arthur saw him reach for his weapon and assumed he intended to kill him, so Chrome could only watch helplessly as he vowed to send him to the underworld. As Arthur raised his sword, he yelled that even as a monster, Chrome, whose skillless could never defeat him. In response, Chrome blocked his attack with his sword. At that moment, he remembered struggling with Arthur, who had a short temper and often belittled him. But this time, it felt like a whole different level, because Arthur seemed to have lost his mind. Facing him, Chrome thought Arthur was the worst person he could meet in Rockdat, so he now wondered how he should deal with him. As they fought, Arthur wondered how Chrome was so fast since he couldn't keep up. Suddenly, Chrome reversed his sword and struck Arthur in the stomach with the handle. Immediately, Arthur dropped to his knees in pain. There, he wondered if this Chrome in front of him was really the eternal low level. Unaware, Arthur didn't know Chrome's level was over double his, which is enough to defeat him and calm him. But Arthur began laughing. He then stood up and declared that he could not stand dying in a place like this. With that, he thought how Chrome should have died back then, and that survival was impossible. Yet, seeing him standing in front of him, he grits his teeth and wondered why. Nevertheless, he cloaked his sword in flames and declared it would destroy Chrome even if blocked. In reaction, Chrome ducked down. Following that, he kicked Arthur's feet, so Arthur quickly fell to the ground. But seeing his sword thrown, Arthur crawled for it as Chrome admitted he bore a grudge, but only wished never to see him again. Still, Arthur ordered him not to lie while accusing him of trying to trick him and eat him. Seeing his trembling expression, Chrome realized Arthur wasn't in his right mind and couldn't be convinced, so he extended his hand to push him away with his skill. Meanwhile, in the south, the wall had already been torn down. Due to it, the monsters finally arrived. Seeing them, the guards shouted that the monsters had invaded the town. At that moment, Chrome heard the noise. He then recognized that the roar came from a monster. However, he was surprised that monsters would attack Rockdat just like 10 years ago. Meanwhile, Arthur believed the disaster was impossible because there were no nearby dungeon irregularities. Suddenly, he realized something. He then blamed Chrome for leading monsters, which left Chrome to wonder about Arthur's nonsense. But Chrome could no longer delay, and planned to use an illusion to make Arthur faint. But he stopped when someone arrived. Seeing the girl running away, he thought that someone had almost seen him. However, the girl was stopped by Arthur. He then noted that her weapon marked her as an adventurer, but she only replied by asking him to move because she was in a hurry. Still, Arthur kept accusing Chrome of summoning monsters and urged her to defeat him. Hearing this, Chrome quickly apologized and explained that Arthur was confused. The girl then called Arthur a fool, but he insisted Chrome had died and become a monster. Meanwhile, Chrome felt something unusual, as if he was being drawn closer to the girl. With that, he hurriedly ordered Arthur to stay away, but Arthur told him to shut up. As Arthur kept calling him a monster, the girl drew her scythe. She then suddenly attacked Arthur from behind, so Chrome shouted Arthur's name in alarm. Shaken, Arthur questioned the girl, but she only said it was impossible that Chrome led the monsters. After all, she was the one who had led them. Hearing this, Chrome began to feel uneasy. As Arthur crawled away, the girl said she was ordered to carry someone's blood to the town center. So she raised her scythe and declared she had no time to waste on idiots like him. Hearing this, Arthur was visibly terrified. As she approached him, Chrome quickly blocked her with his sword. Confused, she pointed out that they had just been fighting moments ago. But Chrome replied that didn't mean he could ignore her attempt to kill Arthur. Besides, she seemed to know something about the monsters in town, which made her smile. With that, he declared that she would have to tell him everything she knew. After noticing many brave fools in town, she warned him not to bore her. Unfortunately, she was in a hurry or she would have savored cutting him to pieces. But he only replied he'd defeat her quickly to help the southern town under attack. In response, she quickly agreed. As she attacked him, she declared that she could not let him go. Witnessing this, Arthur began to wonder why Chrome would pretend to protect him. After all, he was certain that Chrome had died back then. Not only that, but he had also killed him so he could escape from that bugbear nest. Suddenly, he recalled rumors of corpses turning into mana-absorbing monsters that seek to settle past grudges. Therefore, he looked at Chrome and thought that he should kill him because he came back for that. Meanwhile, Chrome realized his fast and strong opponent's huge weapon made closing in difficult. Moreover, he noticed that she was even stronger than Galro, so he guessed she was around level 50, and as strong as top adventurers the Night Orders would recruit. Seeing her relentless attacks, he couldn't believe he was fighting her in Rockdat, but at least he managed to see some openings. While she's still stunned, he rushed toward her and struck her with his sword. As a result, she was thrown back. Holding her ground, she admitted it hurt, and that Chrome was better than she expected. Chrome then thought the wound might weaken her, but he needed to defeat her quickly, save Arthur, and help with the monsters. Unexpectedly, she began using the healing skill on her wound. Upon seeing the white magic, he was surprised to find that she had a healing ability. Suddenly, she said this situation was a problem, but she's now enjoying herself. Hearing that, he realized she was actually planning to use her healing skill to wear him down. With that, they continued clashing with each other. As Chrome blocked her, he feared a prolonged battle would raise casualties despite their healing skills. Arthur's also watching so he couldn't fight in monster form without risking the city's defense. Hence, he could not use Fan to win this battle in one decisive strike right now. Besides, his skill relied on fear, but she showed none. Therefore, he decided to use Soul Eater to uncover her fears. After all, even Galro had fears, so finding hers would let him stop her with Fan. Suddenly, she began praising his rare skill. But as their weapons clashed, she stated that she was not kind enough to let such a telegraphed attack land on her. Hearing this, he realized she was on guard now and left no openings to strike. Suddenly, she wondered if maintaining his skill drained too much mana for him to last. Listening to this, Chrome grew visibly worried. Noticing his reaction, she confirmed that she had struck the truth. Even so, Chrome continued to attack her, so she retaliated and knocked Chrome's sword to the ground. Raising her scythe, she said he was easy to read and was rushing the battle. But to her surprise, she noticed his hand moving and realized his plan. At that moment, Chrome extended his monster hand and made sure Arthur couldn't see it. With that, he managed to touch her with his claws and activated Dream Eater. At once, he was drawn into her memories. Soon after, he was transported elsewhere. Looking around, he guessed this was her mental realm, yet it was strange that there was nothing at all. As he continued walking, he recalled that using this ability on Galro showed ruined cities, dungeons, or open fields. But he had never encountered a white void like this, so though he wanted to know her true self, he realized the emptiness revealed nothing. Suddenly, he saw a little girl nearby, so he quickly approached her. There, he heard the girl muttering in frustration as her healing skills failed. As she kept trying, he leaned closer. But he was stunned when he saw scissors, a knife, and several rat corpses. Frustrated, the girl exclaimed that she had even tried giving a rat 2 heads. Witnessing this, Chrome was left speechless. Suddenly, the girl turned her head and showed him her horrifying expression. After snapping back, Chrome's head throbbed as he wondered what was wrong with her mind. But he noticed she felt no fear, and only a chilling, emotionless cruelty. Without warning, the girl told him she didn't understand his move but found it unpleasant. Realizing the danger, Chrome hurriedly grabbed his sword. Unfortunately, she swiftly slashed his body with her scythe. Thrown to the ground, Chrome could no longer keep his eyes open. Seeing this, she declared that this was the end. As Chrome rose, he admitted she was more skilled and his doppelganger failed. Hence, the only option left was to undo his masquerade skill. After all, only Arthur is present, but he could reveal him as a monster to the town, and that would bring chaos, which could be deadly with monsters already in town. Meanwhile, Arthur watched and realized that Chrome would be killed at this rate. But believing Chrome sought revenge, he thought it fitting if Chrome died. However, when he looked at the girl, he feared she might kill him after Chrome. Therefore, he wondered if Chrome truly came to kill him since Chrome had saved him earlier. Gritting his teeth, he picked up a stone nearby and cloaked it with flame. At the same time, Chrome continued thinking that undoing his masquerade would be his last resort. As he moved, he recalled his parents' death and thought a commotion would hinder defense and cause more casualty. With that in mind, he continued clashing with her, but his sword was knocked away again. She then readied her scythe to strike him, but an incoming flame shot toward her and struck directly. Surprised, Chrome looked at Arthur, but Arthur was only glad he had hit her. However, she turned her attention to him and asked if he had no tact for interrupting like that. Deciding to kill him first, she stabbed his arm with her scythe. Seeing this, Chrome was certain she was going to kill Arthur. Believing there was no time to hesitate, he reached for his mask. Meanwhile, Arthur begged her to stop because he did not want to die. At that moment, the girl sensed something behind her and struck, but her scythe was stopped by Chrome. Surprised, she wondered where he came from, as he wasn't one of her monsters. Then she suddenly realized that the man from earlier was this monster. Chrome then immediately attacked and forced her to dodge, so she nearly lost her balance. Before she could recover, he struck again and succeeded, so she immediately retreated. At that moment, she realized he was powerful and possessed more arms than a human. Meanwhile, Arthur looked at the monster and thought it was terrifying. However, he soon realized that it was Chrome, and he was indeed a monster. At the same time, the girl noticed Chrome had self-control, unlike other monsters consumed by hatred and destruction. Watching him, she thought he was an irregularity that could ruin their plans. Fortunately, she realized he wasn't fully grown and had to end it while she could. Activating her immortal demon skill, she said the task was simply to send monsters to kill hundreds, so she never imagined she would be forced to go all out. Seeing his surprise, she explained the spell boosted her life energy making her stronger and instantly healing wounds. However, the price was her lifespan. Setting that aside, she moved in to attack him to stop the game. She then managed to stab his arm and smiled menacingly. But his wound began to heal, and Chrome caught her side at the same time. Hearing this, she realized he let her side hit him to stop it. In the next moment, Chrome clawed her eye. Covering the wound, she smiled faintly and was impressed by his strength. Still, she quickly put distance between them. Following that, she began healing her eye. Once restored, she resolved to wear him down with her immortality. Yet unexpectedly, her own scythe pierced her chest. Shocked, she couldn't believe he threw her weapon back after working to take it. As she struggled to pull it out, she suddenly saw Chrome appear right before her. He then drove his fist into her face, so she was sent crashing into the wall, but she still marveled at his strength. With a twisted smile, she admitted he was the first to make her feel such delightful pain. Meanwhile, Chrome thought casualties would rise if the battle dragged on, so he had to end it now. Immediately, she launched another assault on him. While attacking, she ordered him to give up since her mana made her immortal. She also added she never expected a monster like him to help humans without giving in. As their battle continued, she reminded him that Arthur had attacked him earlier, so she wondered why he was so determined to earn the favor of humans. With that, she labeled him a creepy monster. In response, he struck her directly on the jaw. Even with her neck broken, she mocked him by asking if he was daft. Once her neck healed, she demanded if he still didn't understand what immortal meant. Ignoring her words, he severed her arm. Following that, he sliced her stomach. As a result, her body split into two. Her upper body then fell to the ground while her lower half collapsed to its knees. Believing it was over, he turned to leave, but she suddenly appeared behind him after he lowered his guard. Following that, she declared that she would take him with her. Unfazed, he grabbed her by the neck. He then proceeded to slam her into the ground. As she lay there, she smiled and said that this was where it ended. Still, she looked at him and told him she pitied him for not living like a monster. While struggling in his grasp, she declared that no matter how hard he tried to act kind toward humans, no one would ever love him, but he simply replied that it was fine. After that, he slammed her head into the ground with such force that it shattered. As Chrome gained experience and leveled up to 53, he reflected that he never sought to be a hero and only wanted to lessen everyone's suffering. Setting that thought aside, he was relieved that no one had witnessed the fight. He then turned his attention to Arthur, who exclaimed that his suspicions were finally confirmed. So he exclaimed that Chrome truly was a monster. As Chrome approached, Arthur insisted that Chrome had returned to kill him. Suddenly, Chrome grabbed his head. Arthur then felt an overwhelming pressure and was teleported into a void. Bewildered, he demanded to know where he was. Unexpectedly, he was confronted by Chrome's phantom skill instead. Horrified, he screamed for help. Eventually, he passed out. Looking at him, Chrome hoped to end things unseen, so he needed to force Arthur to stay still and silent. But considering how ragged Arthur looked, Chrome thought Arthur might still call him a monster when he woke. And though he disliked using the skill, he now had no choice but to manipulate Arthur's memories. Looking at Arthur, he noticed the deep circles under his eyes. So he knew Arthur was terrified, and though he felt it served him right, he realized it could trouble Klania too. With that thought, he used Dream Eater on him. In Arthur's memories, they were back in the dungeon. There, they faced the imps after being led to their nest. But when the imps attacked, someone suddenly sliced one in half. A figure then emerged, and it was revealed to be a doppelganger. Seeing this, Arthur's companion urged him to run. As they fled, Arthur felt that something was not right. His memory then jumped to the time his companion said forest dungeon monsters were a good way to earn money. But Arthur sweated nervously and asked if it was really just the two of them. Suddenly, his memory shifted to when he first met Chrome, who was shunned by other parties. He then noted Chrome's one-use skill kept him from leveling and unfit as an adventurer, so no party would take him and others were better for odd jobs than him. Even so, Arthur offered his hand. He then told Chrome he could join them if he refused to give up being an adventurer. At that point, Arthur's companion said Arthur's father was killed by monsters like Chrome's parents, but Chrome just thanked them and said he was ready to give up being an adventurer. Hearing this, Arthur told him it was a smart decision. Yet, as he turned around, Chrome thanked him for inviting him. When Arthur heard his name called, he stopped and asked Chrome how he knew his name. At that moment, Arthur's memory ended and he woke up. While he's still unsure if it was a dream, he saw Chrome carrying him and calling for help. After that, Chrome asked the man to take Arthur to safety since he was heading south. But seeing Arthur already awake, he told him a strange woman attacked and he collapsed. Hearing this, Arthur admitted his memory was foggy but recalled something like that. But after realizing Chrome saved him, Arthur asked if he was a traveling adventurer since he's unfamiliar. Unbeknownst to Arthur, Chrome erased his memories so he wouldn't call him a monster or troublemaker. Moreover, Chrome was certain Arthur would finally be able to sleep peacefully at night. Unexpectedly, Arthur felt something stir inside him, so he quickly bowed deeply before Chrome. Seeing this, the man beside asked what he was doing, but Arthur himself did not know, and the only thing he was certain of was that he had to apologize to Chrome. Seeing this, Chrome saw Arthur's fear vanish with his memories and let his guilt surface. After all, Arthur had nearly been crushed by it. With that, he said Arthur must be confused, but he needs to leave now to face the monster. As he left Arthur behind, he said only "see you," while deliberately calling Arthur's name. Meanwhile, at the south gate, the Third Eyes appeared, and multiple of them attacked the people nearby. At that moment, one of the defenders struggled to fend off a third eye. Seeing their numbers, the others urged evacuating women and children to the north. Suddenly, Fenrir's roar echoed through the surroundings. Upon hearing this, the man quickly confirmed that Fenrir was the boss of this dungeon disaster. He knew when the boss left, impure mana stopped circulating, and the dungeon lost its function. Thus, monsters drawn to their boss's mana gather to terrorize, and only defeating the boss ends it. Knowing this, the man thought that it might be the end of Rokdat. Seeing the incoming group of Third Eyes, he gripped his weapon even though he could not fight for much longer. Still, he chose to fight and was ready to die protecting his hometown. However, someone suddenly asked him to fall back. Following that, Chrome stood in front. Seeing him, the man told him he couldn't handle that many enemies alone. Immediately, the Third Eyes leapt at Chrome to attack. In response, Chrome swung his sword and struck them down. After successfully killing them, he obtained 6 and 8 XP. On the other hand, the man was stunned by what he had just witnessed. Shortly after, the remaining pack of Third Eyes angrily approached Chrome. Yet Chrome urged them to come and declared he'd fight anyone troubling the city. Afterwards, the corpses of Third Eyes were scattered across the ground. But Chrome did not stop and continued killing the remaining one. At that moment, one Third Eye managed to catch him off guard and bit his arm. He quickly reversed his sword and struck the Third Eye. After that, he sliced it down and obtained 6 XP from it. Afterward, he proceeded to use regeneration on his arm. Suddenly, he noticed his mana was low, so he used Dream Eater. So when he stabbed the Third Eye, he managed to obtain another 5 XP. At the same time, he could recover as much mana as he wanted with Dream Eater. And with regeneration and Dream Eater, he'd never tire no matter the opponents. Aside from that, he didn't need his monster form since these monsters weren't strong. At that moment, other adventurers exclaimed an amazing hero had arrived and planned to follow him. However, one of them stopped when he realized it was Chrome and wondered how he had survived. Watching him kill the Third Eye, he recalled Chrome's black hair and that he never had such strength. Furthermore, he knew Chrome would never wear such a grim and stern expression. Afterwards, a man praised Chrome and hoped he would finish the threats. However, Chrome's attention shifted forward. There, they saw Fenrir suddenly appear. Seeing this, another man declared that the dungeon boss had now arrived. Meanwhile, Fenrir looked to its side and found the dead Third Eyes nearby. As a result, Fenrir growled in anger at them. It then swung its tail and slammed a nearby building. Seeing this, the man ordered the group to defeat Fenrir and end it. However, Chrome told them to step back since he could handle Fenrir alone. Surprised, the man said he couldn't do it alone, no matter how strong he is. But Fenrir's attention soon turned to Chrome, so Chrome noticed that its level was 46. Knowing this, he remarked that it was much weaker than both Galro and Orbis, so he then proceeded to attack it with his sword. Consequently, Fenrir backed away and growled at him. But Chrome only replied that he wouldn't let Fenrir harm Rokdat anymore. Hearing this, Fenrir nervously growled at him. Meanwhile, the adventurers who witnessed Chrome's actions called him awesome. After all, they saw him taking on that monstrosity all on his own. At the same time, Fenrir stood tall before Chrome. While it stood still, Chrome used regeneration on himself. Seeing Fenrir unmoving, he leapt forward and slashed it down with his sword. As Fenrir faltered, Chrome noted his higher level and endless mana from Dream Eater and regeneration. So though Fenrir is tough, it couldn't outlast him in endurance. However, Chrome was caught off guard when he saw it moving away. Seeing it tries to escape, the others moved to stop it to prevent more casualties. As Fenrir ran, they threw chains at it. Immediately, its feet were tangled. Soon after, its body was shackled completely. Confused, Fenrir looked around. When it turned, it saw Chrome's doppelganger form. Startled, it shouted in horror. At that moment, Chrome struck with his Fam skill and hit Fenrir on the neck. Its body soon fell to the ground, and Chrome gained experience that raised his level to 54. Witnessing this, nearby adventurers couldn't believe Chrome had defeated Fenrir. On the other hand, Chrome was relieved he stopped the boss and the dungeon disaster. Yet looking at Fenrir, he noticed things that didn't add up. He also recalled the girl claiming she led the monsters, but he wasn't able to ask its meaning. Suddenly, the others began declaring the birth of a hero and asking who he was. So to avoid standing out, he ordered them to split up and handle the remaining monsters. Hearing this, they agreed that they could not relax yet, so they split up, and Chrome left after hunting his share. Still, he was glad to have protected his hometown with nothing to complain about. But by chance, he passed by Arthur's companion. When the man saw Chrome, he began to wonder if it was really him. After all, both his expression and the aura around him seemed completely different. But he thought that whether it was truly Chrome or not, it was better not to tell Arthur, since in his current state, Arthur was bound to take anything the wrong way. Later near the guild, Chrome returned to the girl's corpse to ensure she stayed dead. But there was also something about her that continued to bother him. From the first moment he saw her, he felt a strange pull and sharp nausea. Even now, as he checked her corpse, he could still feel it. Suddenly, something caught his attention. On her chest lay a crystal, and he wondered what it was. However, this also made him think that it might be the source of the feeling. With that, he suspected this was what she used to lure monsters. So although he is uncertain, he could not leave it behind in Rockdat. The next morning, the injured were being treated outside. At that time, Clamia was distributing medicine and prioritizing the most serious cases. As she ran, she looked around and wondered if her brother might be nearby. Suddenly, she overheard a few people talking. One of them claimed that a white-haired adventurer defeated the boss and saved Rockdat from ruin. Hearing this, Clamia remembered Chrome's promise to become a hero and protect her. She also recalled her brother's farewell and his vow to grow stronger and return to her. With those memories, a smile finally crossed her face. Under her breath, she whispered her hope that he would hurry and come home. At Rayburg Capital, a meeting was being held. At that moment, a man exclaimed the Watchtower people were massacred and suspected someone was responsible. But another man replied monster attacks spark rumors, so he must not be easily deceived. Shortly after, another man asked about the claws of Devon and the Red Man's whereabouts. Hearing this, Elent and Mirror remained silent nearby. With that, the man said they needed to hurry because Judgment Day was near. Upon hearing this, Mirror grew confused about what Judgment Day meant. Later, as they were on their way, Elent cursed the men for yelling since it solved nothing. Hearing this, Mira asked him why the other knight captains were so shaken. He then reminded her of the Red Man linked to monster attacks, and she confirmed it. However, she was convinced that all the knight captains knew something more. Hearing this, he warned her that excessive speculation could shorten her life, and she apologized. Still, he admitted the uproar was natural, and he finally decided to tell her the truth. Listening to this, Mira felt uneasy. He then shared that a century ago, a lord bound monsters to attack the capital. That man was Viscount Arrows, who had red hair and a red birthmark. Upon hearing this, she asked if he was the Red Man, but it's impossible after 100 years. Elent then added that 300 years ago, a court mage was executed for cursing a town. They didn't know the mage's name, but he had red hair and a terrible facial inflammation. Listening to this, Mira was left stunned. Elent then continued saying that a god's blessing 1,000 years ago let them live free from fear of monsters, but this made Mira ask what was wrong with it. He then said that many blessings cause 7 days of disasters, including earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, fires, and monsters. On the last day, a red abominable monster emerged from the swamp. Hearing that, Mira asked if that was the Red Man, and he said it likely was since only top officials knew to avoid panic. Either way, monster attacks are rising yearly and humanity can't hold out if it continues. Hence, finding the Red Man is key and the nation's top priority. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Mita received wonderful news. So he told Asher Rockdat was hit by a monster attack as predicted. So though it was resolved miraculously fast, at least Asher proved he could keep his promise. With that, he agreed to fund the research and suggested they might rule the world together. However, Asher suddenly slammed his fist on the table, and his expression was dejected. Surprised by this, Mito called out to him, but Asher doubted how it happened and didn't care if it was resolved, since he was troubled by Garette's disappearance, despite her being strong and immortal with white magic. Knowing this, he wondered if there's someone stronger that could handle both Fenrir and Garette. He then suspected the knights, and thought they likely recovered the crystal with his blood. Still, he didn't believe the current leaders were capable of such a feat, and concluded it was the work of an irregular. Hearing this, Mito asked what he meant by irregular. Asher then explained that it was a monster born from the sham of a god who had cursed this world. Setting that aside, he thanked Mito since they could now take another step forward in his research. But he warned their plans were at risk after his subordinate was killed in Rockdat. and asked Mito's help to deal with it. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, Chrome sat alone and continued looking at the crystal.